Strategic Management and Ethics. Table of Content. Navigating Strategy with Integrity. Chapter 1. Foundations of Strategic Management. Chapter 2. Business Ethics Fundamentals. Chapter 3. Strategic Analysis and Ethical Considerations. Chapter 4. Strategy Formulation and Ethical Leadership. Chapter 5. Strategy Implementation and Ethics in Action. Chapter 6. Corporate Governance and Ethical Risk Management. Chapter 7. Ethics in Global Strategy. Chapter 8. Strategic Innovation and Ethics. Chapter 9. Crisis Management and Ethical Decision-Making. Chapter 10. Measuring and Evaluating Ethical Strategy. Chapter 11. Leadership and Ethics in Strategic Management. Chapter 12. Ethics in Mergers, Acquisitions, and Strategic Alliances. Chapter 13. Corporate Social Responsibility and Ethical Branding. Chapter 14. Technology, Data Ethics, and Strategic Management. Chapter 15. Strategic Ethics Training and Organizational Development. Chapter 16. Future Trends in Strategic Ethics. Chapter 17. Global Ethical Standards and Corporate Governance. Chapter 18. Integrating Strategic Ethics Across Organizational Functions. Chapter 19. Measuring the Impact of Strategic Ethics. Chapter 20. Strategic Ethics in Crisis Management. Chapter 21. Ethics, Leadership, and Organizational Culture. Chapter 22. Ethical Decision-Making Models in Strategic Management. Chapter 23. Ethics, Innovation, and Competitive Advantage. Chapter 24. Ethics in Strategic Partnerships and Global Alliances. Chapter 25. Ethics in Corporate Social Responsibility, CSR, and Sustainability. Chapter 26. Ethics in Risk Management and Strategic Decision-Making. Chapter 27. Ethics in Corporate Governance and Board Oversight. Chapter 28. Ethics in Corporate Culture Transformation. Chapter 29. Ethical Leadership in the Digital Age. Chapter 30. Integrating Ethics into Strategic Performance Metrics. Chapter 31. The Future of Strategic Management and Ethics. Chapter 32. Conclusion and Synthesis. Navigating Strategy with Integrity. In today's rapidly evolving business landscape, organizations face pressures that extend far beyond the traditional pursuit of profit. Globalization, technological disruption, environmental challenges, and heightened societal expectations have reshaped the very definition of corporate success. Strategic management is no longer solely about competitive positioning, market share, or operational efficiency. It now requires organizations to ask a deeper, more enduring question. How can we achieve our objectives in a way that is responsible, sustainable, and ethical? Ethics is not an accessory to strategy, it is its foundation. The decisions that leaders make, from resource allocation to innovation priorities, from risk management to stakeholder engagement, have profound implications for society, the environment, and future generations. Companies that ignore this reality risk reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and long-term decline, while those that embrace ethical strategic thinking position themselves for resilience, trust, and sustainable growth. This book explores the critical intersection of strategic management and ethics. It demonstrates how organizations can integrate moral principles into every stage of strategic planning and execution. Through detailed frameworks, practical tools, and real-world case studies, from the triumphs of Microsoft and Patagonia to the failures of Enron and BP, readers will gain actionable insights into creating strategies that are both effective and principled. Throughout these chapters, you will discover how ethical leadership, corporate governance, culture, risk management, innovation, and stakeholder engagement work together to create enduring value. You will learn how to translate abstract values into measurable objectives, embed ethical considerations into decision-making processes, and align organizational performance with societal and environmental expectations. The journey toward ethical strategic management is both challenging and rewarding. It demands foresight, courage, and a commitment to doing what is right, even when it is difficult. Yet the rewards are clear. Organizations that embed ethics at the core of their strategy cultivate trust, foster loyalty, and achieve sustainable competitive advantage in an increasingly complex world. Whether you are a business leader, manager, student, or scholar, this book provides a comprehensive roadmap for navigating the complexities of strategy with integrity. It invites you to rethink conventional notions of success and embrace a holistic, ethical approach that balances profit, purpose, and principle. Welcome to a journey where strategy meets ethics, a journey toward building organizations that are not only successful, but also responsible, resilient, and respected. Chapter 1. Foundations of Strategic Management. 1.1. Introduction to Strategic Management. Strategic management is the discipline that guides organizations in defining their long-term goals, allocating resources efficiently, and responding to an ever-changing business environment. It combines analysis, decision-making, and action to ensure sustainable competitive advantage. In today's dynamic markets, organizations face rapid technological changes, evolving consumer preferences, and complex regulatory environments. Strategic management allows companies to anticipate challenges, leverage opportunities, and align their operations with a long-term vision. At its core, strategic management is about answering three critical questions. Where is the organization now? Assessing internal and external factors. Where does the organization want to go? Setting strategic objectives and goals. How can the organization get there? Designing and executing strategies effectively. 1.2. Evolution of strategic management. The concept of strategic management has evolved over the past century. Early 20th century focused on operational efficiency, hierarchical control, and production optimization, Taylorism, and scientific management. 1960s to 1970s, emergence of formal planning approaches, introduction of SWOT analysis and corporate planning departments. 1980s, shift to competitive positioning. Michael Porter introduced frameworks like the 5 forces and generic strategies. 2000s present, emphasis on agility, knowledge management, innovation, and integration of ethics and CSR into strategy. Modern strategic management is holistic, considering not only profits but also stakeholder expectations, ethical responsibility, and sustainable practices. 1.3 Levels of strategy. Strategic management operates at 3 main levels. Corporate level strategy. Corporate strategy answers the question, which industries or markets should we compete in? Focuses on portfolio management and resource allocation among business units. Examples include diversification, vertical integration, or strategic alliances. Case example: Alphabet Inc., Google's parent, manages multiple businesses, including search, cloud services, YouTube, and autonomous vehicles, using a corporate strategy that balances risk and opportunity. Business-level strategy. Business-level strategy addresses how should we compete in a specific market? Focuses on achieving a sustainable competitive advantage within a specific business unit. Michael Porter's generic strategies. Cost leadership. Differentiation. Focus strategy. Case example: Apple Inc. employs a differentiation strategy by focusing on premium design-centric consumer electronics. Functional level strategy. Functional strategies are detailed plans for individual departments, including marketing, operations, HR, and R&D. Ensure the execution of corporate and business-level strategies. Example: marketing strategy may focus on brand loyalty campaigns, while operations strategy emphasizes supply chain efficiency. 1.4 The strategic management process. The strategic management process is typically divided into 5 stages. Environmental scanning. Identifying external opportunities and threats, as well as internal strengths and weaknesses, SWOT analysis. Tools include pestle analysis, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal. Strategy formulation. Developing long-term plans based on environmental insights. Includes corporate, business, and functional level strategies. Strategy implementation. Executing the strategies through resource allocation, organizational design, and operational plans. Success depends on leadership, culture, and communication. Strategy evaluation and control. Monitoring performance, comparing results with objectives, and adjusting strategies as needed. Tools, balanced scorecard, key performance indicators, KPIs, benchmarking. 1.5 Tools and frameworks for strategic analysis. SWOT analysis. Identifies strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Example: Amazon's strengths include logistics efficiency, weaknesses include low-margin retail operations, opportunities include cloud computing expansion, and threats include regulatory scrutiny. Pestle analysis. Assesses political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal factors. Example: Tesla evaluates environmental regulations when entering global markets for EVs. Porter's 5 forces. Analyzes industry structure. Competitive rivalry. Threat of new entrants. Threat of substitutes. Bargaining power of suppliers. Bargaining power of buyers. 1.6 Strategic decision-making. Effective strategic decision-making balances analysis and intuition. Data-driven insights. Ethical considerations. Risk assessment. Scenario planning for uncertain environments. Decision-making must align with corporate values, social responsibility, and long-term sustainability. 1.7 Case study, Apple Inc. Overview. Apple has consistently achieved competitive advantage through innovation, design excellence, and brand loyalty. Strategic actions. Differentiation strategy in hardware and software ecosystems. Vertical integration, owning supply chain components. Continuous investment in R&D and sustainable materials. Ethical considerations. Labor practices in overseas factories have prompted Apple to adopt stricter supplier guidelines. Focus on environmental responsibility with renewable energy initiatives and recyclable product designs. Lessons learned. A well-defined strategy must integrate ethics and sustainability. Innovation and brand value drive long-term competitive advantage. 1.8 Summary. Strategic management ensures organizations define, implement, and monitor long-term objectives. 3 levels of strategy: corporate, business, and functional, guide decision-making. Tools like SWOT, Pestle, and Porter's 5 forces help analyze the environment and resources. Ethical considerations are integral to modern strategic management, as illustrated by Apple's practices. Chapter 2: Business Ethics Fundamentals. 2.1 Introduction to Business Ethics. Business ethics refers to the study and application of moral principles in business decision-making and behavior. It ensures that organizations operate with integrity, fairness, and responsibility toward all stakeholders, including employees, customers, suppliers, investors, and society. In today's interconnected world, ethical practices are no longer optional. Scandals, regulatory fines, and loss of reputation can destroy even the most profitable organizations. Ethical frameworks guide managers in balancing profit motives with social and environmental responsibility. Key objectives of business ethics. Promote fair and transparent practices. Ensure compliance with laws and regulations. Protect and enhance stakeholder trust. Integrate ethical considerations into strategic decision-making. 2.2 The importance of ethics in strategic management. Ethics and strategy are inseparable in sustainable business. Ethical strategies enhance brand reputation, customer loyalty, and employee satisfaction. Unethical practices can lead to legal penalties, financial loss, and public distrust. Ethical considerations are particularly critical in globalization, technology, and environmental sustainability. Example: companies like Patagonia and Unilever integrate ethical practices directly into their strategic goals, ensuring long-term sustainability alongside profitability. 2.3 Ethical theories in business. To guide ethical decision-making, managers rely on established philosophical frameworks. Utilitarianism focuses on actions that maximize overall happiness or minimize harm. Decision-making evaluates consequences for all stakeholders. Example: a company may adopt eco-friendly manufacturing processes to reduce environmental harm, even if it increases costs. Deontology emphasizes duty, rules, and obligations regardless of outcomes. Ethics are judged by adherence to principles rather than consequences. Example: a business refusing to bribe officials even if it risks losing a contract. Virtue ethics focuses on the moral character of decision-makers rather than specific actions. Encourages cultivating virtues like honesty, integrity, fairness, and courage. Example: a CEO leading with transparency and fairness, fostering an ethical corporate culture. Stakeholder theory. Decisions should consider all stakeholders' interests, not just shareholders. Ethical strategy balances profitability with social responsibility. Example: a company investing in local community programs while generating revenue. 2.4 Ethical decision-making frameworks. Strategic managers need structured approaches for ethical dilemmas. The four-component model. Moral awareness. Recognize the ethical issues in a situation. Moral judgment. Evaluate options using ethical principles. Moral intent. Prioritize ethical values over personal or organizational gain. Moral action. Implement the chosen ethical decision. The plus model. Policies, legal, universal self. Test whether decisions comply with organizational policies, laws, universal principles, and personal values. 2.5 Common ethical issues in business. Employee relations, fair wages, workplace discrimination, harassment prevention. Consumer protection, honest advertising, product safety and transparency. Environmental responsibility, pollution control, sustainable resource usage. Financial integrity, accurate reporting, avoiding fraud, insider trading. Global business ethics, navigating bribery, labor laws, and cultural norms in international markets. Mini example: Walmart faced criticism for labor practices, highlighting the need for ethical oversight in global operations. 2.6 Integrating ethics into corporate strategy. Strategic alignment with ethics requires defining corporate values and mission statements that emphasize ethics. Incorporating ethics into performance metrics and KPIs. Training leaders and employees on ethical behavior. Conducting regular ethics audits and compliance checks. Example: Starbucks integrates ethical sourcing of coffee and community service into its corporate strategy, enhancing brand reputation and customer loyalty. 2.7 Case study: Johnson & Johnson Tylenol crisis. Background: in 1982, 7 people died after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. Strategic and ethical response. Immediate recall of all Tylenol products nationwide. Transparent communication with the public and media. Implementation of tamper-proof packaging. Rebuilding customer trust through responsible actions rather than short-term profits. Lessons learned. Ethical decision-making can protect brand reputation and long-term profitability. Rapid, transparent responses to crises demonstrate integrity. Embedding ethics into strategic management strengthens resilience. 2.8 Benefits of ethical strategic management. Improved corporate reputation and trust. Enhanced employee engagement and retention. Reduced risk of legal penalties and scandals. Stronger long-term financial performance. Positive impact on society and the environment. 2.9 Summary. Ethics is a cornerstone of strategic management and long-term success. Managers use ethical theories, frameworks, and structured decision-making models to resolve dilemmas. Businesses must integrate ethical considerations into all strategic levels. Case studies like Johnson & Johnson demonstrate how ethics can align with strategy to safeguard both society and corporate interests. Chapter 3. Strategic Analysis and Ethical Considerations. 3.1 Introduction. Strategic analysis is the process of evaluating an organization's internal capabilities and external environment to make informed decisions. Integrating ethics into strategic analysis ensures that decisions are not only profitable, but socially responsible and sustainable. In an increasingly interconnected and transparent world, companies are held accountable not just for financial outcomes, but also for ethical practices. Ethical strategic analysis allows organizations to anticipate potential dilemmas, mitigate risks, and enhance stakeholder trust. 3.2 The role of environmental scanning. Environmental scanning is the systematic collection and analysis of information about external factors that affect the organization. External analysis. Opportunities, favorable conditions in the market, technology, or regulations that the company can leverage. Threats, potential risks from competitors, regulations, or social trends. Tools for external analysis. Pestle analysis, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal. Example: Tesla evaluates environmental regulations and subsidies to guide its EV strategy globally. Porter's 5 Forces determines industry competitiveness. Rivalry, threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes, supplier power, buyer power. Ethical implications in external analysis. Avoid exploiting loopholes in regulations at the expense of society. Consider environmental and social consequences when identifying opportunities. Incorporate stakeholder perspectives to ensure long-term sustainability. 3.3 Internal analysis. Internal analysis assesses an organization's strengths and weaknesses in resources, capabilities, and culture. Resource-based view (RBV) identifies valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized (VRIO) resources. Ethical perspective: use resources responsibly without harming stakeholders. Example: Apple leverages its design and supply chain capabilities while addressing labor and environmental concerns in its sourcing. Value chain analysis examines activities from procurement to delivery to find efficiency and value creation. Ethical focus: ensure that suppliers and production processes adhere to fair labor and environmental standards. 3.4 Stakeholder analysis and corporate responsibility. Strategic decisions affect multiple stakeholders: shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, communities, and the environment. Ethical strategic analysis ensures that stakeholder interests are balanced. Steps in stakeholder analysis. Identify stakeholders. Assess influence and interest. Evaluate potential ethical concerns. Integrate findings into strategic decisions. Example: Unilever considers environmental impact, supplier welfare, and consumer health in its sustainable business strategies. 3.5 Integrating ethics into SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is a common strategic tool that identifies internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. Integrating ethics adds a new dimension. 3.6 Ethical decision-making in strategy formulation. Strategic formulation involves deciding what the organization will do and how it will compete. Ethical considerations guide this process. Avoid strategies that harm society or stakeholders. Incorporate CSR, ESG, environmental, social governance, and sustainability into objectives. Anticipate ethical dilemmas and plan mitigations. Example: Patagonia's strategy prioritizes environmental sustainability, such as sourcing recycled materials, even if it slightly reduces short-term profits. 3.7 Case Study: Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan. Background: Unilever, a global consumer goods company, recognized that long-term success requires balancing profit with social and environmental responsibility. Strategic and ethical actions. Integrated sustainability into core business strategy. Focused on reducing environmental footprint and improving health and hygiene. Engaged suppliers to adhere to ethical standards. Created metrics to track social and environmental impact alongside financial performance. Outcomes: strengthened brand loyalty and employee engagement. Reduced environmental footprint and improved supplier practices. Achieved sustainable growth while maintaining ethical standards. Lessons learned: ethical strategic analysis strengthens long-term competitiveness. Stakeholder-centric strategies create value beyond profits. Metrics and accountability are critical to embedding ethics into strategy. 3.8 Strategic Tools with Ethical Integration. Balanced Scorecard measures financial, customer, internal process, and learning growth perspectives with ethical KPIs. Scenario Planning evaluates potential ethical risks under different future scenarios. Ethical Audits systematic review of practices to ensure compliance with corporate values and societal norms. 3.9 Summary. Strategic analysis identifies opportunities and threats while assessing internal capabilities. Ethics should be integrated into environmental scanning, internal analysis, and stakeholder management. Tools like SWOT, PESTLE, VRIO, and value chain analysis can incorporate ethical dimensions. Case studies like Unilever demonstrate that ethical strategic analysis leads to sustainable competitive advantage and stakeholder trust. Chapter 4: Strategy Formulation and Ethical Leadership. 4.1 Introduction. Strategy formulation is the process of deciding what the organization wants to achieve and how it plans to achieve it. Ethical leadership ensures that these strategies are not only profitable, but socially responsible, sustainable, and aligned with corporate values. While traditional strategy focuses on market positioning, resource allocation, and competitive advantage, ethical strategy formulation adds another dimension: balancing business goals with societal impact, stakeholder welfare, and moral responsibility. 4.2 The Role of Vision and Mission. Vision statement describes the long-term aspiration of the organization. Ethical component reflects values, social responsibility, and sustainability. Example: Patagonia's vision emphasizes environmental stewardship alongside business success. Mission statement defines the organization's purpose and how it creates value. Ethical mission guides operational and strategic decisions toward responsible outcomes. Example: Unilever's mission focuses on improving health, hygiene, and environmental sustainability while growing the business. Key takeaway: vision and mission statements set the ethical and strategic direction for the organization. 4.3 Strategic Objectives and Ethical Goals. Strategic objectives translate vision and mission into measurable, actionable goals. Integrating ethics ensures these goals consider both financial and societal outcomes. Financial goals: revenue growth, market share, profitability. Ethical goals: reducing environmental impact, fair labor practices, community engagement, transparency in governance. Example: Microsoft integrates ethical AI principles into strategic objectives for innovation, ensuring technology development aligns with ethical standards. 4.4 Strategic Formulation Process. Identifying strategic alternatives. Organizations develop multiple options based on internal capabilities, external opportunities and threats, ethical implications of each alternative. Example: a company may choose between outsourcing production for cost savings or investing in local sustainable production practices. Evaluating strategic alternatives. Assess each option for financial viability, risk, and ethical considerations. Tools, decision matrices, cost-benefit analysis, and ethical scoring frameworks. Selecting the strategy. Choose the alternative that balances profitability, competitive advantage, and ethical responsibility. Ethical strategy often prioritizes long-term sustainability over short-term gain. 4.5 Ethical Leadership in Strategy. Ethical leadership is critical for translating strategic plans into actions that reflect organizational values. Characteristics of ethical leaders. Integrity, consistently acting according to ethical principles. Transparency, open communication about decisions and their rationale. Accountability, accepting responsibility for outcomes, including mistakes. Empathy, considering stakeholder welfare in decision-making. Vision, guiding the organization toward ethical and strategic goals. Leadership styles that promote ethics. Transformational leadership inspires employees to exceed expectations while prioritizing ethical behavior. Servant leadership focuses on serving stakeholders and employees first, aligning strategy with societal benefit. Authentic leadership builds trust through honesty, consistency, and moral clarity. Example: Paul Polman, former CEO of Unilever, demonstrated ethical leadership by integrating sustainability into corporate strategy and long-term growth plans. 4.6 Corporate Social Responsibility, CSR, and Strategy. CSR is a framework that integrates social, environmental, and ethical concerns into business operations. Strategic CSR aligns CSR initiatives with core business strategy to create shared value. Operational CSR implements ethical practices in daily operations. Examples: Patagonia uses environmental initiatives as a core component of its strategy. Starbucks implements ethical sourcing and community engagement programs that support brand reputation and growth. 4.7 Ethical decision-making in strategic formulation. Strategic formulation often involves trade-offs. Ethical decision-making ensures decisions respect stakeholders' rights. Long-term societal and environmental impact is considered. Corporate values are upheld in all scenarios. Framework for ethical strategic decision-making. Identify the stakeholders affected. Consider alternatives and consequences. Evaluate against ethical principles. Select the course of action that balances strategy and ethics. Monitor outcomes and adjust as needed. 4.8 Case Study: Patagonia Mission-Driven Strategy. Background: Patagonia, an outdoor apparel company, integrates environmental and social ethics into its business model. Strategic actions: uses recycled and sustainable materials in production. Donates 1% of sales to environmental causes. Advocates for corporate responsibility and environmental protection. Ethical leadership. CEO Yvonne Chouinard emphasizes environmental responsibility over short-term profits. Employees are empowered to participate in ethical initiatives. Outcomes: strong brand loyalty and customer engagement. Consistent revenue growth aligned with ethical practices. Reputation as a leader in sustainable business practices. Lessons learned: Ethical leadership can drive strategy and create competitive advantage. CSR can be fully integrated into business strategy, rather than being a peripheral activity. Stakeholder-centric strategy fosters trust, engagement, and sustainability. 4.9 Summary. Strategy formulation defines the organization's direction and how it will achieve objectives. Ethical leadership ensures that strategies are aligned with moral principles, societal welfare, and long-term sustainability. Vision, mission, and strategic objectives should reflect both profitability and ethical responsibility. CSR and stakeholder engagement are integral to ethical strategic formulation. Case studies like Patagonia demonstrate how ethics and strategy can reinforce each other for long-term success. Chapter 5. Strategy Implementation and Ethics in Action. 5.1 Introduction. Strategy formulation is only effective if executed properly. Strategy implementation involves turning plans into actions through resource allocation, organizational design, leadership, and performance management. Ethical considerations are critical during this stage because poor implementation can compromise integrity, stakeholder trust, and long-term success. Effective strategy implementation requires clear communication of objectives, alignment of organizational structure and culture, monitoring and evaluation systems, ethical decision-making at all levels. 5.2 Aligning organizational structure with strategy. Organizational structure defines how tasks, responsibilities, and authority are distributed. The structure must support the chosen strategy while fostering ethical behavior. Common structures. Functional structure groups departments by functions: marketing, finance, operations. Pros: clear roles, specialization. Ethical risk. Silos may reduce cross-functional ethical oversight. Divisional structure groups by product lines, markets, or regions. Pros: focus on product-market needs. Ethical risk. Divisions may prioritize profits over company-wide ethical standards. Matrix structure combines functional and divisional structures. Pros: flexible, promotes collaboration. Ethical risk. Confusion in authority may reduce accountability. Ethical considerations in structure. Ensure reporting lines encourage transparency. Design oversight mechanisms to monitor ethical behavior. Create channels for employees to report unethical practices safely. 5.3 Organizational culture and ethics. Culture influences how strategies are executed and whether ethical standards are followed. Characteristics of ethical culture. Leadership sets the tone from the top. Employees understand ethical expectations and values. Open communication and whistleblower protections exist. Ethical behavior is recognized and rewarded. Example: Google fosters an ethical culture by promoting transparency, diversity, and responsible AI development, ensuring technology aligns with societal values. 5.4 Resource allocation. Successful strategy implementation requires allocating financial, human, and technological resources effectively. Ethical resource allocation considers both efficiency and fairness. Fair labor practices in hiring and compensation. Investments in sustainable technologies and processes. Equitable distribution of opportunities across teams. Example: Tesla invests in EV infrastructure while maintaining labor standards in factories to ensure ethical implementation of growth strategies. 5.5 Ethical change management. Implementing strategy often involves change, which can create ethical challenges. Layoffs and restructuring must be handled with transparency and fairness. Adoption of new technology must consider employee impact and data privacy. Ethical training programs should accompany change initiatives. Steps for ethical change management. Communicate the need for change clearly. Explain how changes align with corporate values. Support affected stakeholders, employees, suppliers, customers. Monitor for unintended ethical consequences. 5.6 Performance measurement with ethical KPIs. Measuring implementation success requires monitoring both strategic and ethical performance. Key performance indicators, KPIs. Financial KPIs, revenue growth, ROI. Strategic KPIs, market share, product innovation. Ethical KPIs. Environmental impact, carbon footprint, waste reduction. Social responsibility, employee engagement, community impact. Governance and compliance metrics. Example, Starbucks measures ethical sourcing of coffee beans, employee welfare, and community contributions alongside financial performance. 5.7 Integrating ethics into operations. Ethics must be embedded in operational decisions. Supply chain management. Ensure suppliers comply with labor and environmental standards. Marketing and advertising. Maintain honesty, transparency, and respect for consumers. Customer service. Address complaints and feedback responsibly. Example, Unilever monitors suppliers to ensure ethical sourcing and environmental compliance, reflecting ethical strategy in operations. 5.8 Case study, Tesla, operational challenges and ethical implementation. Background, Tesla has rapidly scaled its EV production while facing ethical scrutiny on labor practices, product quality, and environmental impact. Strategic implementation actions. Expansion of gigafactories worldwide to meet demand. Adoption of sustainable manufacturing practices to reduce carbon footprint. Introduction of ethical labor guidelines and worker safety protocols. Ethical lessons. Rapid growth must be balanced with ethical oversight. Transparency in addressing operational challenges strengthens stakeholder trust. Ethical performance metrics ensure long-term sustainability and reputation management. 5.9 Challenges in ethical strategy implementation. Conflicting priorities, short-term profit versus ethical standards. Cultural differences, implementing global strategies ethically across diverse regions. Resource constraints, balancing cost efficiency with ethical practices. Resistance to change. Employees may resist ethical initiatives that increase workload or complexity. Solutions. Strong leadership and ethical tone at the top. Continuous training and communication. Stakeholder engagement and feedback mechanisms. Monitoring and auditing systems. 5.10 Summary. Strategy implementation is critical for achieving organizational goals. Organizational structure, culture, resource allocation, and change management must support ethical practices. Ethical KPIs, operational integration, and transparency ensure long-term success. Case studies like Tesla highlight the challenges and benefits of ethical implementation. Chapter 6. Corporate Governance and Ethical Risk Management. 6.1 Introduction. Corporate governance is the system by which organizations are directed, controlled, and held accountable to stakeholders. Ethical governance ensures that strategic decisions are aligned with moral principles, legal compliance, and long-term sustainability. Effective governance mitigates risks, strengthens stakeholder trust, and fosters a culture of transparency and accountability. Ethical risk management identifies potential threats to an organization's integrity and reputation and implements strategies to address them proactively. 6.2 Principles of Corporate Governance. Good corporate governance is guided by several key principles. Transparency, open communication about strategy, financial performance, and risks. Accountability, leaders and board members are responsible for decisions and their outcomes. Fairness, equitable treatment of all stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, and communities. Responsibility, compliance with laws, ethical standards, and social expectations. Sustainability, consideration of long-term impacts on society and the environment. Example: Unilever's board regularly reviews sustainability initiatives alongside financial performance, ensuring transparency and accountability. 6.3 Governance structures and ethical oversight. Board of Directors sets strategic direction and oversees executive management, monitors compliance with legal, ethical, and environmental standards, ensures that risk management processes are in place. Committees for ethical oversight. Audit Committee monitors financial integrity and regulatory compliance. Risk Committee identifies and mitigates ethical and operational risks. CSR Committee oversees corporate social responsibility initiatives. Ethical codes and policies. Organizations adopt codes of conduct, anti-corruption policies, and whistleblower protections. Ethical policies should be communicated to all employees and stakeholders. 6.4 Ethical risk management. Ethical risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks that may compromise integrity, stakeholder trust, or legal compliance. Types of ethical risks. Operational risks, unsafe labor practices, supply chain violations. Financial risks, fraud, misreporting, corruption. Reputational risks, negative publicity due to unethical decisions. Regulatory risks, non-compliance with laws and industry standards. Strategic risks, pursuing growth strategies that conflict with ethical standards. Risk identification and assessment. Conduct regular audits and reviews. Engage stakeholders to identify potential ethical concerns. Assess likelihood and impact of risks on reputation, finances, and society. Risk mitigation strategies. Establish clear ethical policies and training programs. Implement monitoring systems and reporting channels. Promote ethical leadership at all levels. Develop contingency plans for crisis situations. 6.5 Board responsibilities in ethical governance. The Board of Directors plays a critical role in ensuring ethical governance. Approve ethical strategies and CSR initiatives. Review management performance against ethical KPIs. Monitor compliance with laws and ethical standards. Ensure stakeholder engagement and communication. Oversee risk management programs to prevent ethical lapses. Example: Johnson & Johnson's board acted decisively during the Tylenol crisis, balancing legal compliance with ethical responsibility, reinforcing stakeholder trust. 6.6 Case Study: Volkswagen Emissions Scandal. Background: Volkswagen manipulated emissions tests to appear compliant with environmental regulations, compromising ethical standards for competitive advantage. Governance failures. Lack of transparency and accountability at executive levels. Inadequate risk oversight by the board and audit committees. Weak ethical culture that prioritized profit over compliance. Outcomes: multi-billion-dollar fines and legal penalties. Severe reputational damage and loss of consumer trust. Restructuring of governance and compliance processes. Lessons learned. Strong ethical governance is critical to prevent strategic and operational risks. Boards must actively monitor compliance and cultivate a culture of integrity. Ethical risk management should be integrated into every aspect of strategy. 6.7 Integrating ethical risk management into strategy. Ethical risk management should be a continuous process embedded in strategic management. Conduct ethical audits during strategy formulation. Identify potential ethical conflicts in implementation plans. Monitor performance using ethical KPIs. Adjust strategies proactively to mitigate risks. Tools and frameworks. Risk registers track potential ethical risks and mitigation actions. Scenario analysis assess ethical outcomes of different strategic options. Balanced scorecards include ethics and compliance alongside financial and operational KPIs. 6.8 Summary. Corporate governance ensures accountability, transparency, and fairness in strategic management. Ethical risk management identifies and mitigates potential threats to integrity, reputation, and stakeholder trust. Boards and executive leaders play a key role in embedding ethics into strategy. Case studies like Volkswagen demonstrate the consequences of governance failures and the importance of proactive ethical oversight. Chapter 7. Ethics in Global Strategy. 7.1 Introduction. As organizations expand internationally, strategic management becomes more complex due to diverse cultural, regulatory, and social environments. Ethical considerations are critical in global strategy to ensure that international operations are responsible, sustainable, and aligned with corporate values. Global ethical strategy involves balancing profit motives with social responsibility, legal compliance, and cultural sensitivity. Companies must navigate challenges like differing labor standards, environmental regulations, corruption risks, and consumer expectations across countries. 7.2 Ethical Challenges in Global Strategy. Cultural differences. Business practices and ethical norms vary widely across regions. What is acceptable in one country may be unethical elsewhere, e.g., gift-giving or labor practices. Ethical global strategy requires understanding and respecting local values while maintaining corporate integrity. Example: McDonald's adapts menu offerings and marketing strategies to local cultural and ethical norms, such as sourcing halal products in Muslim-majority countries. Regulatory compliance. Companies must comply with both home country laws and host country regulations. Ethical risks arise when local laws are weak or enforcement is inconsistent. Example: anti-bribery laws like the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, require companies to avoid paying bribes, even in regions where such practices are common. Labor and human rights. Ethical global strategy involves ensuring fair wages, safe working conditions, and protection of human rights across supply chains. Organizations may face scrutiny if suppliers violate labor laws or human rights standards. Example: Nike faced criticism in the 1990s for poor labor conditions in overseas factories, prompting the development of a robust supplier code of conduct. Environmental responsibility. International operations can have significant environmental impact. Ethical strategy involves reducing carbon footprint, pollution, and resource depletion. Example: IKEA sources sustainable wood and materials for its global supply chain to meet environmental commitments. 7.3 Ethical frameworks for global strategy. Universal ethical principles. Apply consistent ethical standards across all regions. Examples: human rights, anti-corruption, environmental stewardship. Cultural relativism. Recognizes local customs and practices in decision-making. Ethical strategy balances global standards with local adaptation. Integration. Companies must navigate tensions between global norms and local practices while avoiding exploitation or harm. Stakeholder theory in global strategy. Identify and consider interests of all stakeholders, including local communities, employees, customers, governments, and investors. Ethical global strategy aligns profitability with positive social and environmental outcomes. 7.4 Corporate social responsibility in global operations. CSR is critical in managing ethics internationally. Strategic CSR aligns global CSR initiatives with business goals, creating shared value. Operational CSR ensures daily practices are ethically sound across countries. Examples: Nestlé implements sustainable water usage policies in developing countries. Unilever's global sustainability initiatives address environmental, health, and social challenges. 7.5 Ethical decision-making in cross-border strategy. When expanding internationally, companies face ethical dilemmas requiring structured decision-making. Identify ethical conflicts, assess risks of cultural differences, labor issues, and environmental impact. Evaluate alternatives, consider long-term social and financial implications. Apply ethical frameworks, use utilitarianism, deontology, and stakeholder theory to guide decisions. Implement with transparency, clearly communicate policies and standards to local teams and stakeholders. Monitor and adjust, evaluate outcomes, and modify strategies as needed to maintain ethical compliance. Example: Microsoft ensures AI and technology products adhere to global ethical guidelines while adapting applications to local cultural and legal requirements. 7.6 Case Study: Nestlé Global Supply Chain Ethics. Background: Nestlé operates in over 180 countries, sourcing raw materials like cocoa, coffee, and palm oil. Ethical challenges include child labor, deforestation, and environmental impact. Strategic and ethical actions. Implemented the Nestlé Cocoa Plan to reduce child labor in cocoa farms. Committed to responsible sourcing of palm oil, coffee, and other commodities. Engaged local communities to improve education, wages, and environmental practices. Monitor suppliers using audits and third-party verification to enforce ethical compliance. Outcomes: reduced ethical risks in global supply chains. Strengthened brand reputation and stakeholder trust. Demonstrated that ethical global strategy can be aligned with profitability. Lessons learned: cross-border strategy must incorporate ethical and sustainable practices. Stakeholder engagement and local partnerships are critical. Continuous monitoring and accountability are essential for global ethical compliance. 7.7 Tools and frameworks for ethical global strategy. Global CSR scorecards track social, environmental, and governance performance across regions. Ethical supply chain audits monitor suppliers and partners for compliance. Cross-cultural ethical training educate employees and managers on ethical practices in diverse markets. Scenario planning for ethical risks anticipate potential crises and develop mitigation strategies. 7.8 Summary. Global strategy introduces ethical complexity due to cultural, regulatory, labor, and environmental differences. Companies must balance global ethical standards with local adaptation while maintaining corporate integrity. CSR, stakeholder engagement, and ethical oversight are critical for long-term success. Case studies like Nestlé show that ethical global strategy can reduce risk, strengthen reputation, and enhance profitability. Chapter 8: Strategic Innovation and Ethics. 8.1 Introduction. Innovation is a critical driver of competitive advantage, growth, and long-term sustainability. However, innovation without ethical oversight can lead to unintended harm, reputational damage, or regulatory violations. Strategic innovation involves developing new products, services, processes, or business models while aligning with corporate values, stakeholder interests, and social responsibility. Ethical innovation ensures that progress benefits society without compromising moral standards. 8.2 Types of strategic innovation. Product innovation. Developing new or improved products to meet market needs. Ethical consideration. Ensure safety, accessibility, and fairness. Example: pharmaceutical companies must balance rapid drug development with rigorous testing for safety and efficacy. Process innovation. Improving operational efficiency, production methods, or service delivery. Ethical consideration. Protect labor rights and environmental sustainability. Example: Toyota's lean manufacturing integrates efficiency with employee safety and environmental responsibility. Business model innovation. Changing the way value is created, delivered, or captured. Ethical consideration. Avoid exploitative practices or harm to vulnerable stakeholders. Example: Netflix transformed media distribution ethically by providing affordable, accessible streaming services rather than restricting content access. Digital and technological innovation. Incorporates AI, automation, and data analytics. Ethical considerations. Privacy, security, algorithmic bias, and transparency. Example: Microsoft's AI principles guide ethical technology development while fostering innovation. 8.3 Integrating ethics into innovation strategy. Ethical considerations in ideation. Evaluate the societal impact of new ideas. Consider long-term consequences and unintended harm. Engage diverse stakeholders to identify ethical blind spots. Ethical decision-making in R&D. Implement review boards or ethics committees for new products and technologies. Use ethical scoring frameworks to assess feasibility, risk, and impact. Prioritize transparency and accountability in experimentation and testing. Example: Pharmaceutical companies use institutional review boards, IRBs, to ensure ethical clinical trials. 8.4 Sustainable innovation. Sustainable innovation balances economic growth with environmental and social responsibility. Environmental sustainability. Minimize resource consumption, reduce emissions, and use renewable materials. Social responsibility. Ensure accessibility, equity, and safety in products and services. Governance. Transparent reporting and stakeholder engagement in innovation initiatives. Example: Tesla's electric vehicles and solar energy solutions exemplify sustainable innovation aligned with ethical principles. 8.5 Risk management in innovation. Innovation carries inherent risks: financial, operational, regulatory, and ethical. Ethical risk management ensures identification of potential ethical issues early in the innovation process, continuous monitoring and adjustment during implementation, mitigation of unintended social, environmental, or legal consequences. Example: AI startups implement bias detection and privacy safeguards to prevent harm while innovating rapidly. 8.6 Case study: Microsoft ethical AI strategy. Background: Microsoft invests heavily in artificial intelligence to drive innovation in productivity, healthcare, and cloud computing. Ethical and strategic actions. Developed AI principles emphasizing fairness, reliability, safety, privacy, and transparency. Implemented ethics review boards for AI product development. Engaged external stakeholders and regulators to ensure responsible deployment. Integrated ethical considerations into R&D and product rollout. Outcomes. Innovations are aligned with corporate values and societal expectations. Risk of reputational damage or regulatory violations is minimized. Competitive advantage achieved through responsible, trust-based innovation. Lessons learned. Ethical oversight strengthens credibility and public trust. Innovation and ethics are complementary rather than conflicting. Continuous evaluation and stakeholder engagement are key to sustainable innovation. 8.7 Tools and frameworks for ethical innovation. Ethical impact assessment. Evaluate societal, environmental, and stakeholder impact of innovations. Responsible innovation frameworks combine strategy, ethics, and risk management in the development process. Balanced scorecards with innovation metrics include ethical and sustainability KPIs alongside performance indicators. Scenario planning. Anticipate potential ethical and strategic challenges in innovation. 8.8 Summary. Strategic innovation drives growth, but must be guided by ethical principles. Ethical considerations should be integrated in ideation, R&D, implementation, and risk management. Sustainable innovation balances economic, social, and environmental goals. Case studies like Microsoft demonstrate that ethical innovation strengthens competitive advantage and stakeholder trust. Chapter 9: Crisis Management and Ethical Decision-Making. 9.1 Introduction. Crises are unexpected events that threaten an organization's operations, reputation, or stakeholders. They can arise from natural disasters, product failures, financial scandals, regulatory violations, or ethical lapses. Effective crisis management requires rapid decision-making, strategic foresight, and adherence to ethical principles. Ethical decision-making during crises ensures that organizations act responsibly, protect stakeholders, and maintain trust. Companies that prioritize ethics in crisis management often emerge stronger and more resilient. 9.2 Types of Crises. Operational crises. Disruptions in production, supply chains, or service delivery. Example: factory accidents or IT system failures. Financial crises. Cash flow problems, insolvency, or fraud scandals. Example: Enron's accounting scandal highlighted the consequences of unethical financial practices. Reputational crises. Damage to public perception due to unethical behavior, poor product quality, or social irresponsibility. Example: BP's Deepwater Horizon oil spill led to a massive reputational and financial crisis. Regulatory or legal crises. Non-compliance with laws, resulting in fines, sanctions, or lawsuits. Example: Volkswagen's emissions scandal involved legal violations and ethical breaches. 9.3 The Crisis Management Process. Preparation and planning. Develop crisis management plans, identifying potential risks and responses. Establish an ethics-focused crisis management team to evaluate decisions from a moral perspective. Train employees in ethical decision-making under pressure. Detection and early response. Monitor operations and external environment to detect early warning signs. Transparent communication is critical to maintain trust. Containment and mitigation. Act quickly to limit damage. Ensure ethical considerations guide response, even under time pressure. Prioritize stakeholder safety, environmental protection, and legal compliance. Recovery and learning. Rebuild operations, reputation, and stakeholder confidence. Analyze causes of the crisis to prevent recurrence. Integrate ethical lessons into strategic planning and corporate culture. 9.4 Ethical decision-making in crises. Crises often present ethical dilemmas, where decisions must balance competing interests under pressure. A structured framework helps ensure moral integrity. Steps in ethical crisis decision-making. Identify the ethical issue. Recognize potential harm to stakeholders, society, or the environment. Evaluate alternatives. Consider the consequences of each action for all stakeholders. Apply ethical principles. Use utilitarian, deontological, or virtue-based reasoning. Make the decision. Prioritize long-term trust, safety, and integrity over short-term gains. Communicate transparently. Share decisions and rationale with stakeholders openly. Review outcomes, assess impact, and update crisis management plans accordingly. Example: during the Tylenol crisis, Johnson & Johnson prioritized public safety over profits, setting a global standard for ethical crisis response. 9.5 Role of leadership in ethical crisis management. Ethical leadership traits in crisis. Integrity. Make decisions consistent with organizational values. Transparency. Communicate openly with employees, customers, and regulators. Accountability. Accept responsibility for outcomes, even mistakes. Empathy. Consider the impact on all stakeholders. Decisiveness. Act promptly while adhering to ethical principles. Example: Paul Polman, Unilever, emphasized ethical leadership by responding proactively to environmental and social crises in global operations. 9.6 Communication during crises. Clear, timely, and honest communication is essential to maintain stakeholder trust. Avoid misinformation or minimizing the crisis for short-term image protection. Leverage multiple channels to reach all relevant audiences. Communicate ethical actions taken to protect stakeholders and society. Example: Starbucks publicly communicated measures to address racial bias incidents in stores, reinforcing commitment to ethical culture. 9.7 Case Study: Boeing 737 MAX Crisis. Background: Following two fatal crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft, investigations revealed design flaws and communication failures that compromise safety. Strategic and ethical failures: prioritized cost and speed of production over safety concerns. Lack of transparency in sharing critical information with regulators and customers. Weak ethical oversight in engineering and management decisions. Crisis management actions post-scandal. Grounded all 737 MAX aircraft worldwide. Conducted comprehensive safety reviews and redesigns. Implemented ethical and regulatory compliance training for engineers and management. Strengthened internal reporting and whistleblower mechanisms. Lessons learned: safety and ethical standards cannot be compromised for short-term business goals. Transparent communication and accountability are essential in crisis recovery. Ethical culture must be embedded before crises occur. 9.8 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Crisis Management. Crisis management plans incorporate ethical considerations, stakeholder impact assessment, and communication protocols. Decision trees for ethical dilemmas. Evaluate multiple alternatives with ethical outcomes. Balanced scorecards include crisis response effectiveness and ethical KPIs. Scenario planning. Anticipate potential crises and develop ethical response strategies. 9.9 Summary. Crises threaten operations, reputation, and stakeholder trust. Ethical decision-making is essential during crises to ensure integrity, compliance, and long-term sustainability. Leaders play a critical role in maintaining transparency, accountability, and empathy. Case studies like Boeing and Johnson & Johnson illustrate the consequences of ethical failures and successes. Tools like crisis plans, scenario analysis, and decision frameworks help organizations navigate crises responsibly. Chapter 10: Measuring and Evaluating Ethical Strategy. 10.1 Introduction. Measuring and evaluating ethical strategy is essential to ensure that strategic initiatives not only achieve business goals but also uphold moral principles, stakeholder trust, and sustainability. Ethical performance measurement helps organizations track alignment between strategy and corporate values, identify gaps or risks in ethical practices, demonstrate accountability to stakeholders, enhance long-term competitiveness and reputation. Effective evaluation requires both quantitative and qualitative metrics that capture financial, operational, social, and environmental outcomes. 10.2 Frameworks for Measuring Ethical Strategy. Balanced scorecard with ethical metrics. The traditional balanced scorecard measures financial, customer, internal process, and learning and growth perspectives. Integrating ethics includes: example, Starbucks tracks ethical sourcing of coffee, employee welfare, and community impact alongside financial metrics. ESG, environmental social governance metrics. Environmental, carbon footprint, waste reduction, water usage. Social, labor practices, community engagement, diversity and inclusion. Governance, board independence, ethical compliance, anti-corruption measures. Example, Unilever reports ESG performance in its annual Sustainable Living Plan to demonstrate ethical strategy execution globally. 10.3 Monitoring and Reporting Ethical Performance. Internal monitoring. Regular audits and reviews of operations, supply chains, and financial reporting. Employee surveys to measure engagement and perception of ethical culture. Internal dashboards tracking ethical KPIs in real time. External reporting. Sustainability and CSR reports communicated to investors, regulators, and the public. Transparency in disclosing both successes and challenges. Compliance with global reporting standards, e.g. GRI, SASB, TCFD. Example: Tesla and Microsoft publish annual sustainability reports detailing ethical performance in environmental and social domains. 10.4 Key Performance Indicators, KPIs, for ethics. Environmental KPIs. Carbon emissions reduction. Waste recycling rates. Energy efficiency. Social KPIs. Employee engagement and satisfaction. Diversity and inclusion metrics. Community investment impact. Governance KPIs. Number of compliance violations. Whistleblower cases resolved. Board diversity and independence. Strategic KPIs. Alignment of projects with corporate values. Ethical impact of innovation initiatives. Reputation and stakeholder trust metrics. 10.5 Tools and methods for ethical evaluation. Ethical audits. Systematic review of policies, procedures, and outcomes to identify gaps. Stakeholder feedback. Surveys, interviews, and focus groups to assess perceptions of ethical performance. Benchmarking. Compare ethical performance with industry peers to identify best practices. Scenario analysis. Evaluate potential outcomes of strategic decisions on ethical performance. Data analytics. Use AI and analytics to track patterns of ethical compliance, risk, and stakeholder sentiment. 10.6 Case Study. Unilever, evaluating sustainable strategy. Background. Unilever's sustainable living plan integrates ethical and environmental considerations into corporate strategy. Measurement and evaluation, actions. ESG KPIs monitored globally for environmental impact, health, and social outcomes. Annual sustainability reporting to communicate performance transparently. Stakeholder engagement surveys to evaluate perception and impact. Outcomes. Strengthen brand reputation and customer trust. Increased employee engagement through alignment with ethical values. Improved long-term profitability while adhering to sustainability goals. Lessons learned. Continuous monitoring and transparent reporting reinforce ethical strategy. Metrics must cover financial, social, and environmental dimensions. Stakeholder input is critical for accurate evaluation and improvement. 10.7 Challenges in measuring ethical strategy. Intangibility of ethics. Social and ethical impact is harder to quantify than financial performance. Data availability. Gathering reliable data across global operations can be difficult. Balancing metrics. Avoid overemphasis on one dimension at the expense of others. Changing standards. ESG and ethical reporting standards evolve rapidly. Solutions. Combine quantitative and qualitative measures. Standardize data collection processes globally. Review and update KPIs regularly to reflect evolving expectations. 10.8 Summary. Measuring and evaluating ethical strategy ensures alignment with corporate values and stakeholder expectations. Balanced scorecards and ESG metrics provide structured frameworks for ethical performance tracking. Internal monitoring, audits, and external reporting enhance transparency and accountability. Case studies like Unilever demonstrate that systematic evaluation strengthens trust, sustainability, and long-term competitiveness. Continuous improvement, stakeholder engagement, and adaptation to evolving standards are critical for effective ethical strategy management. Chapter 11. Leadership and Ethics in Strategic Management. 11.1 Introduction. Leadership plays a critical role in shaping organizational culture, guiding strategy, and ensuring ethical behavior throughout the company. Ethical leadership ensures that strategic decisions align with corporate values, stakeholder interests, and societal expectations. Leaders influence not only the direction of the organization, but also how employees, partners, and stakeholders perceive and adopt ethical standards. In the modern business environment, ethical leadership is a cornerstone of sustainable success. 11.2 Characteristics of ethical leaders. Integrity. Consistently acts according to ethical principles, even under pressure. Transparency. Communicates openly and honestly with stakeholders. Accountability. Takes responsibility for decisions and their consequences. Empathy. Understands and considers the needs and concerns of stakeholders. Courage. Makes difficult ethical choices even when they may reduce short-term gains. Vision. Inspires employees and stakeholders toward ethical and strategic objectives. Example: Paul Pullman, former CEO of Unilever, demonstrated ethical leadership by integrating sustainability into core strategy, prioritizing long-term societal and environmental impact alongside profitability. 11.3 Leadership styles that promote ethics. Transformational leadership. Inspires employees to exceed expectations while modeling ethical behavior. Focuses on aligning organizational culture with moral values and long-term strategy. Servant leadership. Prioritizes the well-being of employees, customers, and communities. Promotes trust, engagement, and ethical decision-making across the organization. Authentic leadership. Leads through honesty, consistency, and moral clarity. Encourages ethical behavior by demonstrating genuine commitment to values. Ethical leadership in practice. Ethical leaders establish codes of conduct, promote CSR, and create accountability mechanisms. Encourage whistleblowing, reporting mechanisms, and transparent communication. 11.4 Ethical leadership in strategic decision-making. Integrating ethics in strategy. Ethical leaders ensure that strategic objectives are aligned with corporate values. They evaluate risks and opportunities through an ethical lens before implementation. Decision-making frameworks. Stakeholder analysis. Identify the impact of decisions on all stakeholders. Ethical scoring. Assess alternatives based on fairness, sustainability, and compliance. Scenario planning. Anticipate ethical consequences under different strategic options. Example: Johnson & Johnson's handling of the Tylenol crisis reflected ethical leadership in action, prioritizing public safety and stakeholder trust over short-term profits. 11.5 Building an ethical organizational culture. Role of leadership. Leaders set the tone at the top by modeling ethical behavior. Establish organizational norms and reward ethical conduct. Promote training programs, mentoring, and recognition of ethical practices. Mechanisms for culture building. Codes of conduct and ethical policies. Whistleblower protection programs. Transparent communication channels. Integration of ethics into performance evaluations. Example: Google emphasizes ethical culture through its AI principles, employee training, and cross-functional ethics review boards. 11.6 Case study: Paul Pullman and Unilever. Background: under Pullman's leadership, Unilever prioritized sustainability and ethical business practices alongside financial performance. Leadership actions. Integrated sustainability into corporate strategy. Promoted transparency and accountability at all levels. Engaged stakeholders globally to align business practices with societal expectations. Fostered a culture where ethical decision-making was a core competency. Outcomes: strong global reputation and trust among consumers. Long-term growth and profitability aligned with ethical and environmental standards. Employees empowered to participate in sustainability initiatives. Lessons learned. Ethical leadership can create competitive advantage and long-term resilience. Leaders influence organizational culture and ethical behavior through vision, example, and accountability. Stakeholder engagement is critical in implementing ethical strategies effectively. 11.7 Leadership Challenges in Ethics. Short-term pressure versus long-term ethics. Balancing immediate financial performance with ethical standards. Cultural diversity. Leading ethically across different countries with varying norms. Resistance to change. Encouraging employees to adopt ethical practices in a competitive environment. Complex decision-making. Making ethical choices amid uncertainty, competing priorities, or conflicting stakeholder interests. Solutions. Strong ethical frameworks and decision-making tools. Continuous leadership development and ethics training. Transparent communication and reinforcement of organizational values. 11.8 Summary. Ethical leadership is central to aligning strategy with moral principles and stakeholder expectations. Leaders set the tone for organizational culture, influence decision-making, and ensure accountability. Transformational, servant, and authentic leadership styles foster ethical practices across organizations. Case studies like Paul Polman's tenure at Unilever demonstrate how ethical leadership can drive sustainable success. Challenges exist, but structured frameworks, training, and stakeholder engagement help leaders maintain integrity in complex strategic environments. Chapter 12. Ethics in Mergers, Acquisitions, and Strategic Alliances. 12.1 Introduction. Mergers, acquisitions, M&A, and strategic alliances are key strategies for growth, market expansion, and competitive advantage. However, these transactions involve complex legal, financial, and cultural dynamics. Ethical considerations are critical to ensuring that M&A and alliances are conducted responsibly, protect stakeholder interests, and create sustainable value. Ethical lapses during mergers or partnerships can lead to reputational damage, legal penalties, loss of trust, and long-term strategic failure. Companies must integrate ethics at every stage, from due diligence to integration and governance. 12.2 Ethical Challenges in Mergers and Acquisitions. Due diligence and transparency. Accurate disclosure of financial, operational, and legal risks is essential. Ethical challenges arise if information is withheld or misrepresented. Cultural integration. Differences in organizational values, practices, and leadership styles can create ethical conflicts. Employee treatment, communication, and respect for cultural norms must be prioritized. Employee welfare. Layoffs, restructuring, or changes in benefits may negatively affect employees. Ethical M&A practices involve fair treatment, clear communication, and support programs. Regulatory and compliance risks. Adherence to antitrust laws, labor regulations, and environmental standards is critical. Ethical lapses can lead to fines, legal action, or reputational damage. Stakeholder interests. Aligning the interests of shareholders, employees, customers, and communities is essential for sustainable partnerships. 12.3 Ethical Considerations in Strategic Alliances. Partner selection. Evaluate potential partners' ethical standards, reputation, and alignment with corporate values. Avoid partnerships with companies involved in unethical or illegal practices. Governance and control. Define roles, responsibilities, and decision-making authority clearly. Establish ethical oversight mechanisms to monitor performance and compliance. Transparency and communication. Maintain open and honest communication with all stakeholders. Clearly disclose objectives, expectations, and potential risks to partners and regulators. 12.4 Ethical Due Diligence Process. Financial and legal review. Ensure accuracy, compliance, and transparency in all documents. Cultural and ethical assessment. Evaluate organizational values, leadership practices, and employee welfare. Environmental and social responsibility review. Assess sustainability, community impact, and labor practices. Stakeholder analysis. Identify potential conflicts or harm to customers, employees, or communities. Risk mitigation. Develop ethical integration plans and governance structures for the post-merger or partnership phase. Example: Salesforce, during acquisitions, integrates due diligence focused on ethical practices, employee treatment, and corporate culture alignment. 12.5 Integrating ethics into post-merger integration. Employee engagement and retention. Communicate openly about changes in roles, benefits, and expectations. Provide training and support for cultural alignment and ethical behavior. Cultural alignment. Harmonize corporate values and ethical standards across merged organizations. Identify and address ethical gaps in policies or practices. Stakeholder communication. Maintain transparency with investors, regulators, and customers. Highlight commitments to ethical practices, sustainability, and social responsibility. 12.6 Case study: Disney and Pixar acquisition. Background: In 2006, Disney acquired Pixar, a strategic move to strengthen its creative content portfolio. Ethical and strategic actions. Maintain Pixar's creative culture while integrating Disney resources. Transparent communication with employees to retain talent and morale. Focused on shared values, respect, and long-term collaboration, rather than short-term cost-cutting. Outcomes: smooth integration with minimal disruption to employee engagement and creativity. Strengthen market position in animation while maintaining ethical and cultural standards. Demonstrated that respecting organizational culture and ethics enhances post-merger success. Lessons learned: ethical consideration of employees and culture supports long-term strategic objectives. Transparency and respect for stakeholder interests mitigate integration risks. Strategic alliances and acquisitions are more successful when ethics are prioritized alongside financial goals. 12.7 Tools and frameworks for ethical M&A and alliances. Ethical due diligence checklist. Evaluate legal, cultural, social, and environmental factors. Stakeholder impact analysis. Assess the potential effects on employees, customers, communities, and investors. Integration roadmap with ethics. Align policies, culture, and governance in post-merger operations. Monitoring and reporting mechanisms. Track ethical compliance and integration progress. 12.8 Summary. Mergers, acquisitions, and strategic alliances are complex processes with ethical implications. Ethical due diligence, cultural alignment, transparent communication, and stakeholder engagement are critical for success. Case studies like Disney Pixar show that respecting culture and ethical standards enhances long-term strategic outcomes. Tools such as ethical checklists, stakeholder analysis, and monitoring frameworks help organizations manage ethical challenges in corporate growth initiatives. Chapter 13: Corporate Social Responsibility and Ethical Branding. 13.1 Introduction. Corporate social responsibility, CSR, has evolved from a peripheral activity to a core strategic tool that enhances brand reputation, stakeholder trust, and long-term sustainability. Ethical branding, closely linked to CSR, communicates an organization's values, purpose, and commitment to societal well-being. Strategically integrating CSR into business operations ensures that organizations create shared value, benefiting both society and the company, while reinforcing ethical standards and competitive advantage. 13.2 The role of CSR in strategic management. CSR as a strategic tool aligns social, environmental, and ethical initiatives with business objectives. Enhances stakeholder engagement and trust. differentiates the brand in competitive markets. Example: Unilever integrates CSR into its sustainable living plan, driving product innovation, operational efficiency, and environmental stewardship alongside profitability. Benefits of CSR: brand reputation, strengthens public perception and customer loyalty. Employee engagement, increases motivation and retention by aligning work with values. Risk mitigation, reduces reputational, regulatory, and operational risks. Market differentiation, positions the company as a responsible and ethical leader. 13.3 Ethical branding. Definition and importance. Ethical branding communicates the company's commitment to social responsibility, sustainability, and ethical business practices. Builds trust with customers, investors, and employees. Supports long-term business sustainability. Differentiates brands in saturated or competitive markets. Key elements of ethical branding. Transparency, openly share policies, practices, and impacts. Consistency, align marketing and operations with stated values. Authenticity, ensure claims of responsibility reflect real practices. Engagement, actively involve stakeholders in ethical initiatives. Example: Patagonia's ethical branding emphasizes environmental stewardship, transparency, and responsible production, creating a loyal customer base and competitive advantage. 13.4 CSR integration into business strategy. Strategic CSR versus operational CSR. Strategic CSR integrates societal and environmental goals with core business strategy to create shared value. Operational CSR implements responsible practices in day-to-day operations. Example: Starbucks' ethical sourcing of coffee beans is both a strategic and operational CSR initiative, ensuring quality products while supporting communities and fair labor practices. Steps for CSR integration. Identify key social and environmental issues. Align initiatives with corporate mission and stakeholder needs. Develop CSR goals. Set measurable objectives linked to strategy and ethical standards. Allocate resources. Dedicate funding, talent, and technology to CSR initiatives. Implement and monitor. Track performance using KPIs, ESG metrics, and stakeholder feedback. Communicate results. Transparently report progress through sustainability reports and marketing communications. 13.5 Measuring CSR and ethical branding impact. Key performance indicators, KPIs. Environmental: carbon footprint reduction, renewable energy usage, waste management. Social: community engagement, employee satisfaction, diversity and inclusion. Governance: ethical compliance, anti-corruption measures, transparency. Brand impact: customer trust, loyalty, and brand equity metrics. Tools for measurement. ESG reporting standards, GRI, SASB, TCFD. Stakeholder surveys and focus groups. Balanced scorecard with CSR and ethical branding KPIs. Third-party certifications and audits, e.g. Fair Trade, B Corporation. 13.6 Case study. Patagonia, CSR and ethical branding. Background: Patagonia, an outdoor apparel company, has made environmental and social responsibility central to its brand identity. CSR actions: uses recycled and sustainable materials in production. Donates 1% of sales to environmental causes. Advocates for corporate responsibility, climate action, and fair labor practices. Encourages consumer engagement in sustainability initiatives. Ethical branding outcomes: high brand loyalty and strong customer advocacy. Positive differentiation in a competitive retail market. Reinforced reputation as a leader in sustainability and ethics. Lessons learned: CSR and ethical branding can reinforce each other to create competitive advantage. Authenticity and transparency are critical for credibility. Integrating CSR into strategy drives long-term value for both society and the business. 13.7 Challenges in CSR and ethical branding. Greenwashing. Misrepresenting CSR efforts undermines trust and reputation. Resource allocation. Balancing investment in CSR with profitability. Global consistency. Maintaining ethical standards across different markets and cultural contexts. Measurement difficulty. Quantifying social and environmental impact can be complex. Solutions. Ensure transparency, authenticity, and third-party validation. Align CSR initiatives with core business strategy. Regularly monitor, report, and improve CSR and ethical branding efforts. 13.8 Summary. CSR and ethical branding are critical components of modern strategic management. Strategic integration of CSR aligns societal and environmental goals with business objectives. Ethical branding enhances reputation, stakeholder trust, and competitive advantage. Case studies like Patagonia demonstrate how authenticity, transparency, and stakeholder engagement drive long-term success. Measuring CSR impact using KPIs, ESG metrics, and reporting frameworks ensures accountability and continuous improvement. Chapter 14. Technology, Data Ethics, and Strategic Management. 14.1 Introduction. Digital transformation and technological innovation are driving modern business strategies. From artificial intelligence, AI, to big data analytics and automation, technology provides organizations with opportunities for efficiency, market expansion, and innovation. However, these technologies also raise significant ethical challenges that can affect privacy, security, fairness, and societal impact. Integrating data ethics into strategic management ensures that technology is leveraged responsibly, risks are mitigated, and stakeholder trust is maintained. 14.2 Ethical Challenges in Technology and Data. Data privacy and security. Collection, storage, and use of personal data must comply with privacy regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA. Ethical considerations include informed consent, data minimization, and protection against breaches. Algorithmic bias and fairness. AI and machine learning systems can inherit biases from training data, leading to unfair outcomes. Ethical strategy involves auditing algorithms for fairness and inclusivity. Transparency and explainability. Decisions made by automated systems must be understandable to stakeholders. Black box AI systems pose risks to accountability and trust. Digital divide and accessibility. Unequal access to technology can exacerbate social inequalities. Ethical technology strategies prioritize inclusion and equitable access. Intellectual property and AI-generated content. Ownership, copyright, and attribution issues arise with AI-created innovations. Ethical considerations require clear policies and respect for creators' rights. 14.3 Ethical Principles for Technology Strategy. Accountability. Organizations must take responsibility for technological outcomes. Transparency. Stakeholders should understand how technology affects them. Fairness. Ensure that algorithms and digital processes do not discriminate. Privacy. Protect personal data and respect user consent. Sustainability. Consider environmental impact of technological infrastructure. Example: Microsoft's AI principles include fairness, reliability, safety, privacy, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability to guide ethical technology use. 14.4 Integrating data ethics into strategic management. Strategic planning. Incorporate ethical considerations into technology roadmaps and innovation strategies. Assess potential societal, legal, and reputational risks of new digital initiatives. Operational implementation. Implement data governance frameworks to ensure ethical data collection, storage, and usage. Conduct algorithmic audits to detect and mitigate bias. Train employees and teams on data ethics and responsible AI. Monitoring and evaluation. Continuously monitor ethical performance of technology initiatives. Use KPIs related to fairness, transparency, privacy, and impact. Adjust strategies proactively based on stakeholder feedback and regulatory changes. 14.5 Case Study: Microsoft Ethical AI Strategy. Background: Microsoft is a global leader in AI technology, integrating ethics into strategic decision-making for AI development. Ethical actions: developed AI principles focusing on fairness, reliability, safety, privacy, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. Established an AI ethics review board to oversee product development. Engaged external stakeholders and regulators to ensure responsible deployment. Implemented bias detection and privacy safeguards in AI systems. Outcomes: mitigated reputational and legal risks while maintaining innovation leadership. Strengthened stakeholder trust and credibility in AI solutions. Set industry benchmarks for ethical AI development. Lessons learned: ethical oversight strengthens both innovation and corporate reputation. Structured governance and accountability mechanisms are critical for responsible technology use. Stakeholder engagement and transparency are essential for sustainable technology strategy. 14.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Technology Management. Data governance frameworks ensure ethical collection, storage, and use of data. Algorithmic audits detect bias, errors, or unfair outcomes in AI systems. Ethical impact assessment evaluate potential societal, environmental, and stakeholder impacts of technology initiatives. Balanced scorecards include digital ethics KPIs alongside traditional business metrics. Scenario planning anticipate ethical risks and regulatory changes in technology deployment. 14.7 Challenges in technology ethics. Rapid technological change. Ethical policies may lag behind innovation. Complexity of AI systems, difficulty in understanding algorithmic decisions. Global regulation variability, different privacy and data protection laws across regions. Stakeholder awareness, users and employees may not fully understand ethical implications. Solutions: implement continuous monitoring and adaptive governance structures. Promote cross-functional teams with ethics, legal, and technical expertise. Educate stakeholders and employees about ethical technology use. Collaborate with industry groups to set best practices and standards. 14.8 Summary. Technology and data are central to modern strategic management, but pose significant ethical challenges. Data privacy, algorithmic fairness, transparency, and accessibility are critical areas of concern. Ethical principles, governance frameworks, and continuous monitoring ensure responsible technology use. Case studies like Microsoft demonstrate that integrating ethics into technology strategy enhances trust, reduces risk, and supports long-term competitiveness. Organizations must balance innovation with societal, environmental, and stakeholder considerations to achieve sustainable success. Chapter 15: Strategic Ethics Training and Organizational Development. 15.1 Introduction. Organizational ethics cannot be achieved through policies alone. It requires a culture where employees understand, value, and practice ethical behavior. Strategic ethics training and organizational development programs are essential tools to embed ethics across all levels of the company, ensuring alignment with corporate values and long-term strategic objectives. Ethics training enhances decision-making, strengthens corporate culture, mitigates risks, and supports sustainable growth. It is a continuous process integrated into organizational development initiatives. 15.2 Importance of ethics training in strategy. Risk mitigation reduces the likelihood of ethical breaches, fraud, and legal violations. Cultural alignment ensures employees understand and embody organizational values. Employee engagement demonstrates commitment to integrity and fairness, increasing loyalty and morale. Reputation management strengthens stakeholder trust and brand image. Decision-making equips employees with frameworks to navigate ethical dilemmas. Example: companies like Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft invest heavily in ethics training to ensure employees at all levels understand corporate principles and expected behavior. 15.3 Designing an effective ethics training program. Needs assessment. Identify key ethical risks and areas of concern within the organization. Evaluate employee knowledge, attitudes, and behavior regarding ethical standards. Curriculum development. Topics may include corporate governance, compliance, conflict of interest, diversity and inclusion, data ethics, sustainability, and social responsibility. Use real-world case studies to illustrate ethical dilemmas and decision-making processes. Delivery methods. Workshops and seminars, interactive sessions for discussion and scenario-based learning. E-learning modules, accessible online training for global or remote teams. Mentoring and coaching, senior leaders model ethical behavior and guide employees. Simulation exercises, role-playing or scenario analysis to practice ethical decision-making. 15.4 Embedding ethics into organizational development. Leadership development. Train managers and executives in ethical leadership and strategic decision-making. Incorporate ethics into leadership competency models. Performance management. Include ethical behavior and adherence to values in employee performance evaluations. Reward ethical actions alongside traditional performance metrics. Culture and communication. Promote open communication channels for reporting ethical concerns. Encourage storytelling and recognition of ethical behavior across the organization. Embed ethics into onboarding, corporate value statements, and team meetings. 15.5 Case study. Google, ethics training and organizational development. Background: Google, a global technology leader, faces complex ethical challenges related to AI, data privacy, and workplace diversity. Training and development actions. Introduced company-wide ethics programs focused on responsible AI and workplace integrity. Incorporated scenario-based learning and real-world case studies in training. Developed leadership programs emphasizing ethical decision-making and transparency. Established internal committees to monitor adherence to ethical standards and provide guidance. Outcomes: increased employee awareness and accountability regarding ethical issues. Strengthen corporate culture aligned with ethical and strategic goals. Enhance stakeholder trust and reduced risk exposure related to technology and governance. Lessons learned. Ethics training must be continuous, practical, and integrated into organizational development. Leadership modeling and mentorship are critical for cultural adoption. Scenario-based and experiential learning improves understanding and application of ethical principles. 15.6 Tools and frameworks for ethics training. Ethics risk assessment. Identify areas requiring targeted training. Training evaluation metrics. Measure knowledge retention, behavior change, and ethical performance. Scenario-based learning tools. Practice real-world decision-making in a safe environment. Feedback and reporting systems. Track ethical issues, employee concerns, and training effectiveness. Balanced scorecard integration. Include ethics KPIs in organizational development and performance management frameworks. 15.7 Challenges in ethics training and organizational development. Employee engagement. Ensuring training is interactive and meaningful rather than a compliance exercise. Global consistency. adapting training to diverse cultural and regulatory contexts. Behavioral change, encouraging employees to apply training in real-world decisions. Resource allocation, balancing investment in training with other strategic priorities. Solutions. Use interactive and scenario-based learning methods. Align training with organizational values and performance metrics. Regularly update content to reflect evolving ethical standards and challenges. Engage leadership to model ethical behavior and reinforce training outcomes. 15.8 Summary. Ethics training and organizational development are essential for embedding ethical behavior in strategic management. Effective programs combine leadership development, scenario-based learning, performance management, and culture-building initiatives. Case studies like Google demonstrate the importance of continuous, practical, and leadership-driven ethics training. Organizations that invest in ethics education strengthen culture, reduce risk, enhance decision-making, and improve stakeholder trust. Chapter 16. Future Trends in Strategic Ethics. 16.1 Introduction. The landscape of strategic management is evolving rapidly due to globalization, technological advancement, environmental challenges, and shifting societal expectations. Ethical considerations are increasingly central to organizational success, shaping corporate strategy, governance, and stakeholder engagement. Future trends in strategic ethics highlight how businesses must adapt to new risks, opportunities, and expectations while maintaining integrity, sustainability, and social responsibility. 16.2 Globalization and ethical complexity. Increased interconnectedness. Companies operate across multiple jurisdictions with varying cultural, legal, and ethical standards. Cultural sensitivity. Ethical strategy must account for local norms while adhering to universal principles. Supply chain responsibility. Global sourcing amplifies the need for ethical oversight in labor, environmental practices, and governance. Trend. Organizations will increasingly adopt global ethical standards and monitoring systems to maintain consistency and stakeholder trust across borders. 16.3 Technology and digital ethics. AI and automation. Ethical concerns around algorithmic bias, transparency, and decision-making accountability. Data privacy. Expanding regulations and societal expectations for responsible data usage. Cybersecurity. Ethical responsibility to protect sensitive information and digital assets. Emerging tech. Biotechnology, IoT, and blockchain create new ethical dilemmas requiring proactive governance. Trend. Organizations will implement comprehensive technology ethics frameworks, combining governance, compliance, and stakeholder engagement to manage risk and build trust. 16.4 Sustainability and environmental responsibility. Climate change. Companies are under pressure to reduce carbon emissions, waste, and environmental impact. Circular economy. Ethical strategies will increasingly emphasize resource efficiency and sustainable product design. Stakeholder expectations. Consumers, investors, and regulators expect businesses to address sustainability proactively. Trend. Integrating environmental, social, and governance (ESG) metrics into strategic decision-making will become standard practice. 16.5 Social responsibility and inclusive practices. Diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI). Ethical strategy will require proactive policies to ensure fair treatment, representation, and opportunity. Community engagement. Companies are expected to contribute positively to social development and local communities. Human rights. Ethical oversight in global operations will remain critical for labor practices, fair wages, and workplace safety. Trend. Organizations will embed DEI and social responsibility metrics into corporate strategy and performance evaluations. 16.6 Ethical leadership in the future. Adaptive leadership. Leaders must navigate complexity, uncertainty, and ethical dilemmas in rapidly changing environments. Transparency and accountability. Stakeholders demand real-time, accurate information on corporate actions and decision-making. Culture of integrity. Ethical leadership will increasingly be recognized as a competitive advantage. Trend. Leadership development programs will focus on ethics, cultural intelligence, and stakeholder engagement as core competencies. 16.7 Regulatory evolution and governance. Stricter regulations. Governments and international bodies will impose more rigorous compliance requirements on ethics, ESG, and transparency. Global standards. Companies will adopt uniform ethical standards to navigate cross-border operations effectively. Ethics auditing. Independent audits and third-party verification will become standard practice. Trend. Organizations will invest in robust compliance and governance frameworks to preempt regulatory risks and enhance reputation. 16.8 Strategic ethics as a source of competitive advantage. Brand differentiation. Ethical companies will attract loyal customers, investors, and talent. Innovation and trust. Responsible innovation fosters trust and long-term sustainability. Risk mitigation. Ethical strategy reduces legal, reputational, and operational risks. Trend. Ethical strategy will no longer be a peripheral concern, but a core driver of competitive advantage, long-term profitability, and stakeholder value. 16.9 Case study. Tesla, future-oriented ethical strategy. Background. Tesla is a global leader in electric vehicles, renewable energy solutions, and technological innovation. Ethical and strategic actions. Commitment to sustainability through electric vehicles, solar energy, and energy storage solutions. Investment in innovation while addressing environmental and social impact. Transparency in reporting sustainability initiatives and ESG performance. Global engagement to improve supply chain responsibility and labor practices. Outcomes. Positioned as an ethical and innovative leader in clean energy and mobility. Built strong stakeholder trust and brand loyalty. Demonstrates that future-oriented ethical strategy drives both innovation and market leadership. 16.10 Tools and frameworks for future strategic ethics. Ethical scenario planning. Anticipate potential future ethical dilemmas in technology, globalization, and sustainability. Dynamic ESG monitoring. Real-time tracking of environmental, social, and governance performance. Stakeholder engagement platforms. Digital tools to capture feedback, concerns, and expectations globally. Ethical innovation frameworks. Guide responsible development and deployment of emerging technologies. Leadership development modules. Focus on ethics, adaptive decision-making, and cross-cultural competence. 16.11 Summary. Strategic ethics is evolving rapidly due to globalization, technology, sustainability pressures, and societal expectations. Future trends emphasize proactive governance, ethical leadership, responsible innovation, and stakeholder engagement. Companies that integrate ethics into core strategy will gain competitive advantage, trust, and long-term sustainability. Tools like scenario planning, ESG monitoring, and ethical innovation frameworks will guide organizations in navigating complex future challenges. Ethical strategy is no longer optional. It is integral to strategic success in the 21st century. Chapter 17. Global Ethical Standards and Corporate Governance. 17.1 Introduction. As organizations expand globally, they face complex ethical challenges across diverse legal, cultural, and regulatory environments. Maintaining high ethical standards while complying with varying local laws requires a robust governance framework and a commitment to universal principles of integrity, transparency, and accountability. Global ethical standards and corporate governance practices ensure that multinational corporations, MNCs, operate responsibly, maintain stakeholder trust, and achieve sustainable competitive advantage. 17.2 The role of corporate governance in ethics. Definition: corporate governance refers to the system by which companies are directed, controlled, and held accountable to stakeholders. Ethical role: governance structures ensure that strategic decisions align with corporate values, legal compliance, and social responsibility. Key principles: transparency: clear, honest disclosure of financial and operational information. Accountability: board and management answerable to shareholders, regulators, and stakeholders. Fairness: equitable treatment of all stakeholders, including employees, customers, suppliers, and communities. Responsibility: decisions consider social, environmental, and ethical implications. Example: companies adopting the OECD principles of corporate governance integrate ethics, accountability, and stakeholder engagement globally. 17.3 Global Ethical Standards. International Guidelines and Frameworks. UN Global Compact. Principles covering human rights, labor standards, environmental responsibility, and anti-corruption. ISO 37001. Anti-bribery management systems to prevent corruption. OECD Guidelines for multinational enterprises. Promote responsible business conduct in global operations. Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. Standards for sustainability and ESG reporting. Ethical compliance across borders. Companies must align operations with local laws while adhering to universal ethical standards. Challenges include labor practices, environmental regulations, corruption, and cultural differences. Ethical governance frameworks help balance global consistency with local adaptation. 17.4 Board and Leadership Responsibilities. Ethical oversight. Boards ensure that corporate strategy and operations comply with ethical standards and laws. Risk management. Identify and mitigate ethical, legal, and reputational risks globally. Stakeholder engagement. Boards engage with investors, employees, customers, regulators, and communities to understand expectations and concerns. Policy implementation. Enforce codes of conduct, anti-corruption policies, and sustainability commitments across subsidiaries. Example: Nestlé's global board implements ethical governance and sustainability oversight to ensure consistent standards across its international operations. 17.5 Integrating ethics into corporate governance. Codes of conduct and corporate policies. Define acceptable behavior, responsibilities, and accountability mechanisms. Include guidance on bribery, conflicts of interest, environmental compliance, and labor practices. Compliance and reporting systems. Implement whistleblower mechanisms and anonymous reporting channels. Conduct internal audits, ethical risk assessments, and ESG reporting. Ensure transparency with regulators, investors, and the public. Training and cultural alignment. Regular ethics and compliance training for employees and leadership globally. Promote a shared ethical culture across diverse markets. Encourage local adaptation while maintaining universal standards. 17.6 Case Study: Unilever, Global Governance and Ethical Standards. Background: Unilever operates in over 190 countries, requiring consistent ethical governance across diverse cultural and regulatory environments. Governance actions: established a global code of business principles to guide ethical conduct. Implemented compliance programs, risk assessments, and ESG reporting. Trains employees and suppliers on ethical standards and sustainable practices. Engages stakeholders to ensure alignment with global and local expectations. Outcomes: maintain consistent ethical standards across global operations. Strengthen brand reputation, trust, and stakeholder engagement. Demonstrated that ethical governance can support both global scalability and local adaptability. Lessons learned: global ethical standards require strong governance structures and cultural awareness. Training, reporting, and stakeholder engagement are critical for implementation. Ethical governance enhances risk management, brand value, and long-term sustainability. 17.7 Challenges in global ethical governance. Cultural diversity, balancing local norms with universal ethical principles. Regulatory variation, navigating different legal systems and compliance requirements. Enforcement and monitoring, ensuring subsidiaries adhere to corporate ethical policies. Complex supply chains, maintaining ethical oversight in multi-tiered global operations. Solutions. Develop universal ethical frameworks adaptable to local contexts. Conduct regular audits, monitoring, and reporting across regions. Engage local leadership and employees to foster cultural buy-in. Leverage technology to track compliance and performance in real time. 17.8 Tools and frameworks for global ethics and governance. Ethics and compliance management systems. Track policies, training, and reporting globally. ESG reporting dashboards. Monitor environmental, social, and governance performance across subsidiaries. Whistleblower and risk reporting platforms. Enable confidential reporting of ethical issues. Board oversight frameworks. Define roles, responsibilities, and accountability for global governance. Cultural alignment frameworks. Ensure ethical standards are respected while adapting to local norms. 17.9 Summary. Global ethical standards and corporate governance are essential for MNCs to operate responsibly and sustainably. Ethical governance ensures transparency, accountability, fairness, and responsibility across diverse markets. Case studies like Unilever demonstrate the effectiveness of integrating universal ethical principles with local cultural and regulatory adaptation. Tools such as codes of conduct, compliance systems, ESG dashboards, and board oversight frameworks help organizations maintain consistent ethical standards globally. Strong global ethical governance enhances stakeholder trust, reduces risk, and supports long-term strategic success. Chapter 18. Integrating strategic ethics across organizational functions. 18.1 Introduction. Ethics should not be confined to corporate governance or compliance departments. It must permeate every function of an organization. Integrating strategic ethics across marketing, operations, finance, human resources, and technology ensures consistency, enhances stakeholder trust, mitigates risks, and strengthens long-term strategic performance. A function-specific approach allows organizations to address unique ethical challenges while maintaining a unified corporate ethical culture. 18.2 Marketing and ethical strategy. Ethical marketing practices. Honest advertising and transparent communication. Avoiding manipulation, false claims, or exploitative tactics. Promoting social responsibility through brand messaging. Example: Dove's Real Beauty campaigns emphasize authenticity and social values, aligning marketing with ethical principles. Customer data and privacy. Collecting data responsibly and respecting privacy regulations, e.g. GDPR, CCPA. Using customer insights ethically for personalization without exploitation. KPI example: customer trust scores, privacy compliance incidents, and transparency metrics. 18.3 Operations and supply chain ethics. Responsible sourcing. Ensuring suppliers adhere to ethical labor, environmental, and social standards. Conducting audits, certifications, and continuous monitoring. Environmental responsibility. Minimizing carbon footprint, waste, and energy consumption. Adopting sustainable production methods and circular economy principles. Example: Patagonia ensures all suppliers meet strict environmental and labor standards, integrating ethics into global operations. 18.4 Human resources and ethical strategy. Fair employment practices. Promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Ensuring fair compensation, safe working conditions, and career development opportunities. Ethics training and culture. Embedding ethics into onboarding, performance evaluations, and leadership development. Encouraging whistleblowing and reporting mechanisms to address unethical behavior. KPI example: employee engagement, day metrics, and ethical training completion rates. 18.5 Finance and ethical strategy. Ethical financial management. Transparent accounting practices, anti-fraud measures, and compliance with regulations. Responsible investment strategies that consider ESG factors. Risk management. Assessing ethical and social risks in financial decisions, mergers, and acquisitions. Integrating long-term sustainability into capital allocation decisions. Example: BlackRock incorporates ESG and ethical considerations into investment decisions, aligning finance with responsible strategy. 18.6 Technology and digital ethics. Ensuring AI, big data, and automation follow ethical principles: fairness, transparency, privacy. Implementing data governance, monitoring, and stakeholder accountability. Considering the societal impact of emerging technologies. Example: Microsoft integrates AI ethics principles into product development and corporate strategy, ensuring alignment with ethical values. 18.7 Cross-functional integration. Unified ethical framework. Establish a corporate code of ethics that applies across all functions. Align departmental policies and KPIs with overall ethical strategy. Foster interdepartmental collaboration to address ethical risks holistically. Monitoring and reporting. Use dashboards and analytics to track ethical performance across functions. Conduct periodic audits to ensure compliance and identify gaps. Encourage feedback from employees, customers, and stakeholders for continuous improvement. 18.8 Case study: Unilever, ethics across functions. Background: Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan integrates ethical strategy into marketing, operations, HR, finance, and technology. Actions: marketing campaigns focus on sustainability and social responsibility. Supply chain operations ensure responsible sourcing and environmental stewardship. HR promotes ethical culture, diversity, and employee development. Finance decisions consider ESG factors and long-term impact. Technology initiatives follow ethical principles in data and AI use. Outcomes: strong stakeholder trust and brand reputation. Operational efficiency aligned with ethical standards. Leadership in sustainability and corporate responsibility. Lessons learned: cross-functional integration amplifies the impact of ethical strategy. Ethical alignment across functions reinforces culture and long-term competitiveness. Monitoring and KPIs tailored to each function support accountability and continuous improvement. 18.9 Challenges and solutions. 18.10 Summary. Ethics must be embedded across all organizational functions to ensure strategic alignment and stakeholder trust. Function-specific challenges require tailored policies, KPIs, and training. Case studies like Unilever demonstrate how integrated ethics across marketing, operations, HR, finance, and technology strengthens competitiveness and sustainability. Cross-functional collaboration, unified ethical frameworks, and continuous monitoring are critical for successful implementation. Chapter 19: Measuring the Impact of Strategic Ethics. 19.1 Introduction. Strategic ethics is not only about policies, training, or culture. It must be measurable to evaluate its effectiveness and ensure continuous improvement. Measuring ethical impact helps organizations assess performance, identify gaps, reinforce accountability, and demonstrate value to stakeholders. Organizations increasingly rely on data-driven approaches to evaluate ethics, CSR, governance, sustainability, and ethical decision-making across functions. 19.2 Importance of measuring strategic ethics. Accountability. ensures leadership and employees are responsible for ethical conduct. Performance improvement identifies areas for ethical enhancement across processes and functions. Stakeholder trust demonstrates transparency and commitment to ethical standards. Risk mitigation detects potential ethical, legal, and reputational risks proactively. Strategic alignment confirms that ethical initiatives contribute to corporate objectives. Example: companies like Unilever and Microsoft regularly measure ethical performance to integrate ethics into strategic decision-making. 19.3 Key Performance Indicators, KPIs, for ethical impact. Governance and compliance. Number of compliance violations or regulatory breaches. Audit results of ethical and operational processes. Effectiveness of internal reporting and whistleblower mechanisms. CSR and sustainability. Carbon footprint reduction and environmental impact metrics. Community engagement and social contribution outcomes. ESG, environmental social governance, ratings and scores. Employee ethics and culture. Completion rate of ethics and compliance training. Employee engagement and perception of ethical culture, surveys. Number and resolution rate of reported ethical concerns. Marketing and customer trust. Brand reputation indices and trust scores. Customer complaints related to misrepresentation or unethical practices. Ethical certification or endorsement achievements. Technology and data ethics. Incidents of data breaches, misuse, or privacy violations. AI algorithm, bias audits and resolution rates. Compliance with ethical technology standards, e.g. AI principles. 19.4 Tools and frameworks for measuring ethics. Balanced scorecard integration. Include ethical metrics alongside financial and operational KPIs. ESG reporting standards, GRI, SASB, TCFD, and UN Global Compact frameworks. Ethical risk assessment. Evaluate potential impact of ethical lapses in processes, technology, and strategy. Stakeholder feedback systems, surveys, focus groups, and digital engagement to measure perception and trust. Internal audit dashboards, track compliance, policy adherence, and ethical incidents across functions. 19.5 Methodologies for evaluation. Quantitative methods. Scorecards, KPIs, and performance dashboards. ESG ratings, carbon footprint calculations, and compliance metrics. Statistical analysis of employee reports, incidents, and resolutions. Qualitative methods. Employee and stakeholder interviews or surveys. Case study reviews of ethical decision-making outcomes. Narrative reporting on culture, values, and leadership influence. Benchmarking. Compare ethical performance with industry standards and best practices. Use third-party audits and certifications to validate ethical initiatives. 19.6 Case study, Microsoft measuring ethical performance. Background: Microsoft emphasizes ethics across technology, governance, and CSR. Measurement is central to evaluating impact. Actions: monitors compliance with AI principles, privacy policies, and data governance frameworks. Uses ESG reporting and dashboards to track social, environmental, and governance performance. Conducts employee surveys to assess ethical culture and adherence to values. Publishes annual sustainability and ethics reports for stakeholders. Outcomes: transparent reporting strengthens stakeholder trust. Ethical metrics guide strategic decisions in technology and corporate governance. Identifies improvement areas and reinforces accountability across departments. Lessons learned: measurement must combine quantitative and qualitative methods. Continuous monitoring and reporting create feedback loops for improvement. Aligning ethics metrics with strategic objectives enhances organizational performance. 19.7 Challenges in measuring ethics. Intangible nature of ethics. Cultural and behavioral aspects are harder to quantify. Data collection. Ensuring accuracy and completeness in ethical reporting. Comparability. Differences across regions, functions, and industries may complicate benchmarking. Dynamic standards. Ethical expectations and regulations evolve over time. Solutions. Use a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods. Standardize reporting frameworks for comparability and reliability. Continuously update metrics to reflect changing regulations and societal expectations. Encourage stakeholder engagement to validate measurement approaches. 19.8 Summary. Measuring strategic ethics is essential for accountability, continuous improvement, and stakeholder trust. KPIs span governance, CSR, employee culture, marketing, and technology ethics. Tools such as ESG frameworks, balanced scorecards, audits, and stakeholder surveys provide actionable insights. Case studies like Microsoft demonstrate the importance of integrating ethical metrics into strategic decision-making. Organizations that measure and monitor ethics effectively can reinforce culture, reduce risk, and enhance long-term strategic performance. Chapter 20. Strategic Ethics in Crisis Management. 20.1 Introduction. Crises, whether financial, operational, technological, or reputational, test an organization's strategic ethics like no other scenario. Ethical decision-making during crises is critical to maintaining stakeholder trust, ensuring regulatory compliance, and protecting long-term organizational sustainability. Strategic ethics in crisis management involves anticipating risks, preparing ethical frameworks for decision-making, and responding transparently and responsibly under pressure. 20.2 Types of Crises and Ethical Implications. Financial crises. Fraud, accounting irregularities, or liquidity issues. Ethical focus. Transparency, accountability, and fairness to investors and employees. Operational crises. Supply chain disruptions, product recalls, or safety failures. Ethical focus. Responsibility, public safety, and stakeholder communication. Technological crises. Data breaches, cybersecurity attacks, AI failures, or system outages. Ethical focus. Privacy, security, and timely disclosure to affected parties. Reputational crises. Public scandals, negative media coverage, or social media backlash. Ethical focus. Honesty, corrective action, and rebuilding trust. Environmental crises. Pollution, industrial accidents, or natural disaster impacts. Ethical focus. Social responsibility, remediation, and stakeholder engagement. 20.3 Principles of Ethical Crisis Management. Transparency. Provide accurate and timely information to stakeholders. Accountability. Accept responsibility for actions and decisions. Fairness. Treat all stakeholders equitably, avoiding favoritism. Integrity. Make decisions aligned with organizational values and ethical standards. Preparedness. Develop crisis protocols with ethical decision-making frameworks. 20.4 Crisis Management Framework with Ethics. Pre-crisis planning. Conduct risk assessments to identify potential ethical vulnerabilities. Develop ethical crisis response protocols and decision-making guidelines. Train leadership and employees in ethical response scenarios. Crisis response. Activate crisis teams with clear ethical oversight responsibilities. Communicate promptly, truthfully, and consistently with stakeholders. Implement corrective actions that address root causes ethically. Post-crisis review. Conduct ethical audits to evaluate decisions made during the crisis. Identify lessons learned and update crisis response plans. Communicate improvements and accountability measures to rebuild trust. 20.5 Case Study. Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol Crisis 1982. Background. In 1982, cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules caused multiple deaths, creating a major public safety and reputational crisis. Ethical actions. Immediately recalled all Tylenol products nationwide, prioritizing consumer safety over profit. Maintained transparency with the public and media. Developed tamper-evident packaging to prevent future incidents. Communicated openly with stakeholders, including customers, regulators, and employees. Outcomes. Restored public trust and brand reputation within months. Set a global standard for ethical crisis management in the pharmaceutical industry. Lessons learned. Prioritizing ethical responsibility over short-term financial considerations strengthens long-term resilience. Transparency, accountability, and proactive measures are key to mitigating reputational damage. Ethical frameworks guide decision-making in high-pressure scenarios. 20.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Crisis Management. Crisis Ethics Decision Matrix helps leaders evaluate options based on transparency, fairness, and stakeholder impact. Stakeholder communication plans predefine templates for timely and ethical messaging. Crisis simulation exercises, scenario-based training to prepare employees and leaders. Post-crisis auditing tools evaluate ethical performance and identify lessons for continuous improvement. Integrated risk management systems monitor emerging threats and ethical implications in real time. 20.7 Challenges in Ethical Crisis Management. 20.8 Summary. Crises test organizational ethics and strategic decision-making. Ethical principles such as transparency, accountability, fairness, integrity, and preparedness are essential. Pre-crisis planning, ethical response protocols, and post-crisis reviews reinforce organizational resilience. Case studies like Johnson & Johnson demonstrate that prioritizing ethics in crises can restore trust and strengthen long-term strategy. Tools like decision matrices, communication plans, and crisis simulations enable organizations to act ethically under pressure. Chapter 21. Ethics, Leadership, and Organizational Culture. 21.1 Introduction. Organizational culture and leadership are the primary drivers of ethical behavior. Policies, codes of conduct, and governance frameworks are only effective if leaders model ethical behavior and foster a culture of integrity. Strategic ethics requires leaders to create environments where ethical decision-making is expected, supported, and rewarded. This chapter explores how leadership shapes ethical culture, the role of values-based decision-making, and practical strategies to align ethics with organizational culture. 21.2 The Role of Leadership in Ethical Strategy. Modeling behavior. Leaders act as ethical role models by demonstrating integrity, transparency, and accountability. Decision-making. Ethical leaders integrate moral considerations into strategic and operational decisions. Influence and motivation. Leadership shapes employee behavior, attitudes, and engagement with corporate values. Stakeholder trust. Ethical leadership builds credibility with employees, customers, investors, and regulators. Example: Satya Nadella's leadership at Microsoft emphasizes empathy, ethics, and inclusion, driving both innovation and trust. 21.3 Organizational Culture and Ethics. Defining ethical culture. An ethical culture is one where employees consistently act in ways aligned with the organization's values, even under pressure. Key characteristics include shared values emphasizing integrity, fairness, and responsibility. Open communication and transparency. Systems to report unethical behavior safely. Recognition and reinforcement of ethical behavior. Aligning culture with strategy. Embed ethics in organizational mission, vision, and core values. Align performance evaluations, incentives, and rewards with ethical behavior. Ensure cultural alignment across departments and geographic regions. Example: Patagonia promotes environmental stewardship and social responsibility as core cultural values, influencing employee behavior and strategic decisions globally. 21.4 Leadership styles that promote ethics. Transformational leadership inspires employees to adopt ethical standards through vision, empathy, and integrity. Servant leadership prioritizes stakeholder well-being and ethical responsibility over personal or short-term gains. Authentic leadership emphasizes transparency, self-awareness, and consistency between words and actions. Ethical leadership explicitly integrates moral principles into decision-making and organizational guidance. Key insight: leaders must combine ethical awareness with strategic acumen to drive culture and long-term competitive advantage. 21.5 Embedding ethics into organizational practices. Policies and codes of conduct clearly communicate expectations for behavior. Provide guidance for handling ethical dilemmas. Include mechanisms for reporting and accountability. Training and development. Ethics and leadership development programs reinforce cultural values. Scenario-based learning and mentoring strengthen ethical decision-making skills. Recognition and reward systems recognize and reward ethical behavior to reinforce cultural norms. Align incentives with long-term ethical and strategic goals rather than short-term gains. Communication and engagement foster a culture of transparency through regular dialogue and updates. Encourage feedback, questions, and discussions about ethical challenges. Share ethical success stories and lessons learned to reinforce culture. 21.6 Case Study: Microsoft Leadership Driving Ethical Culture. Background: under Satya Nadella, Microsoft transformed its organizational culture to emphasize empathy, inclusion, and ethical responsibility. Actions: redefined corporate mission and values to align with ethical principles. Introduced leadership programs emphasizing ethics, collaboration, and social responsibility. Implemented open communication channels for ethical concerns. Integrated ethical considerations into business strategy, technology development, and stakeholder engagement. Outcomes: strengthened internal ethical culture and employee engagement. Improved stakeholder trust and global brand reputation. Reinforced alignment between leadership behavior, culture, and strategic ethics. Lessons learned: leadership commitment is crucial to embedding ethics in culture. Aligning policies, training, and recognition reinforces ethical behavior. Ethical culture enhances long-term performance, innovation, and stakeholder trust. 21.7 Challenges in aligning leadership and culture. 21.8 Tools and frameworks. Ethical leadership assessment. Evaluate leaders' commitment and behavior in promoting ethics. Culture audits. Assess alignment between stated values and actual behavior. Scenario-based training. Strengthen ethical decision-making across levels. Employee feedback systems. Encourage reporting, engagement, and suggestions on ethics. Integrated KPI dashboards. Track leadership influence on culture and ethical performance. 21.9 Summary. Leadership and organizational culture are critical to embedding strategic ethics. Ethical leaders model behavior, guide decision-making, and influence culture. Ethical culture requires policies, training, recognition systems, and open communication. Case studies like Microsoft demonstrate the impact of values-driven leadership on culture, employee engagement, and strategic success. Organizations that align leadership, culture, and ethics achieve sustainable competitive advantage and stakeholder trust. Chapter 22: Ethical Decision-Making Models in Strategic Management. 22.1 Introduction. Ethical decision-making is at the core of strategic management. Leaders face complex choices where the right course of action may not be immediately clear due to competing stakeholder interests, legal requirements, and moral considerations. Structured ethical decision-making models provide systematic approaches to evaluate options, anticipate consequences, and align actions with corporate values and societal expectations. 22.2 Importance of ethical decision-making. Consistency ensures similar situations are handled fairly across functions and levels. Transparency provides rationale for decisions, enhancing stakeholder trust. Risk mitigation reduces legal, reputational, and operational risks. Strategic alignment ensures decisions are consistent with organizational values and long-term objectives. Organizational learning promotes reflection and continuous improvement in ethical practices. Example: companies like Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft use structured decision-making frameworks to guide leadership during crises and strategic initiatives. 22.3 Ethical decision-making frameworks. Utilitarian approach. Principle: choose actions that maximize overall benefit or minimize harm. Application: evaluate potential consequences for all stakeholders and select the option that provides the greatest net benefit. Example: prioritizing product recalls to ensure public safety despite financial costs. Rights-based approach. Principle: respect the rights of individuals, including privacy, freedom, and fair treatment. Application: ensure decisions do not violate fundamental human or employee rights. Example: ensuring fair labor practices across global supply chains. Justice or fairness approach. Principle: treat stakeholders equitably and distribute benefits and burdens fairly. Application: evaluate whether decisions disproportionately advantage or disadvantage any group. Example: equitable performance evaluation and promotion processes. Virtue ethics approach. Principle: align decisions with moral virtues such as honesty, integrity, and compassion. Application: encourage leaders to consider character and ethical intentions in decision-making. Example: leaders choosing transparency and honesty in stakeholder communication during crises. Stakeholder approach. Principle: balance the interests of all relevant stakeholders in decision-making. Application: map stakeholders, assess impact, and prioritize decisions that support long-term relationships and trust. Example: implementing environmentally sustainable practices to satisfy both customers and regulators. 22.4 Steps in ethical decision-making. Identify the ethical issue. Recognize the problem and potential ethical dilemmas. Gather information. Collect facts, stakeholder perspectives, legal requirements, and cultural context. Evaluate alternatives. Use ethical frameworks, utilitarian rights, fairness, virtue, stakeholder, to analyze options. Make a decision. Select the course of action aligned with ethical principles and strategic objectives. Implement the decision. Execute responsibly, ensuring transparency and stakeholder engagement. Review and reflect. Assess the outcomes, learn from successes and failures, and refine policies. Tool example: ethical decision matrix to evaluate options against multiple ethical criteria. 22.5 Case study: Toyota, ethical decision-making during recalls. Background: in 2010, Toyota faced widespread vehicle recalls due to safety defects. Ethical decision-making guided the company's strategic response. Actions: identified the ethical issue, consumer safety versus short-term financial costs. Gathered information from engineering, regulatory, and stakeholder sources. Evaluated alternatives using utilitarian public safety, fairness, equal treatment of all customers, and rights-based consumer protection approaches. Executed massive recalls and transparent communication with stakeholders. Reviewed internal processes to prevent future ethical lapses. Outcomes: restored public trust and brand reputation over time. Strengthened internal ethical culture and crisis response protocols. Reinforce the importance of structured ethical decision-making in strategic management. Lessons learned: ethical frameworks help navigate complex decisions under pressure. Transparent and stakeholder-focused actions support long-term organizational resilience. Post-decision review is critical for learning and continuous improvement. 22.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Decision-Making. Ethical Decision Matrix. Evaluate alternatives against multiple ethical principles. Stakeholder mapping and impact assessment. Visualize stakeholder interests and potential outcomes. Scenario analysis. Test the ethical and strategic implications of decisions under different conditions. Decision trees with ethical criteria. Systematically identify consequences and obligations. Codes of ethics integration. Reference organizational principles during decision-making processes. 22.7 Challenges in ethical decision-making. 22.8 Summary. Ethical decision-making is a cornerstone of strategic management. Multiple frameworks, utilitarian rights-based, fairness, virtue, and stakeholder approaches guide principal choices. Structured steps, including issue identification, information gathering, evaluation, implementation, and review, improve consistency and transparency. Case studies like Toyota illustrate the importance of ethical frameworks in mitigating risk and maintaining stakeholder trust. Tools such as decision matrices, stakeholder maps, and scenario analysis enhance decision-making across functions and levels. Chapter 23. Ethics, Innovation, and Competitive Advantage. 23.1 Introduction. Innovation is a key driver of competitive advantage, but without ethical oversight, it can create significant risks, including reputational damage, legal issues, and stakeholder distrust. Integrating ethics into innovation ensures that new products, services, and business models align with organizational values, societal expectations, and long-term strategic goals. Ethical innovation promotes sustainable growth, enhances stakeholder trust, and differentiates organizations in competitive markets. 23.2 The relationship between ethics and innovation. Trust and credibility. Ethical innovation builds consumer, investor, and employee confidence. Risk management. Integrating ethics prevents regulatory violations, privacy breaches, and unintended harm. Long-term value creation. Responsible innovation focuses on sustainable and socially beneficial outcomes. Strategic differentiation. Ethical practices can enhance brand reputation and create unique market positioning. Example: Tesla's commitment to sustainable energy technologies demonstrates the strategic value of ethical innovation. 23.3 Principles for Ethical Innovation. Transparency. Clearly communicate product capabilities, limitations, and risks. Accountability. Innovators must take responsibility for potential social, environmental, and ethical impacts. Inclusivity. Consider the needs of diverse stakeholders in design and implementation. Sustainability. Prioritize environmentally responsible and socially beneficial solutions. Integrity. Ensure that innovation aligns with corporate values and ethical standards. 23.4 Strategies to embed ethics in innovation. Ethical design thinking. Incorporate ethical considerations at every stage of product or service design. Use stakeholder mapping to identify potential risks and impacts. Test solutions for unintended consequences before launch. Responsible R&D practices. Evaluate potential ethical dilemmas in research, development, and experimentation. Ensure compliance with laws, regulations, and industry standards. Foster collaboration with external experts to assess societal impact. Innovation governance. Establish ethics review boards or committees for major projects. Implement ethical approval processes before deployment of new technologies or services. Monitor and evaluate outcomes post-implementation for unintended consequences. 23.5 Case Study. Google, AI Ethics and Competitive Advantage. Background. Google, a leader in AI and digital technologies, faces ethical challenges related to data privacy, algorithmic bias, and societal impact. Actions: developed AI principles emphasizing fairness, transparency, privacy, and accountability. Established an internal AI ethics board to review projects and provide guidance. Invested in research on responsible AI and potential societal implications. Engaged stakeholders, including academic experts and the public, to assess ethical risks. Outcomes: built trust among users, regulators, and investors. Strengthened brand reputation as a responsible innovator. Demonstrated that ethical innovation can coexist with competitive advantage and market leadership. Lessons learned: ethics must be integrated proactively, not reactively, into innovation strategies. Governance mechanisms, stakeholder engagement, and transparency enhance both ethical compliance and strategic performance. Responsible innovation can become a differentiating factor in competitive markets. 23.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Innovation. Ethical Impact Assessment. Evaluate potential societal, environmental, and stakeholder consequences before deployment. Innovation Ethics Checklists. Standardized criteria to ensure alignment with corporate values and regulations. Stakeholder Engagement Platforms. Collect feedback from diverse audiences during ideation and testing. Scenario Analysis and Simulations. Assess risks, unintended consequences, and long-term effects. Innovation Governance Committees. Provide oversight and ethical guidance for strategic projects. 23.7 Challenges in Ethical Innovation. 23.8 Summary. Ethical innovation ensures sustainable competitive advantage, trust, and long-term value creation. Principles of transparency, accountability, inclusivity, sustainability, and integrity guide responsible innovation. Strategies include ethical design thinking, responsible R&D practices, innovation governance, and stakeholder engagement. Case studies like Google demonstrate that ethical considerations can strengthen brand trust and market leadership. Tools such as ethical impact assessments, checklists, scenario analysis, and governance committees support integration of ethics into strategic innovation. Chapter 24. Ethics in Strategic Partnerships and Global Alliances. 24.1 Introduction. Strategic partnerships, alliances, and joint ventures are essential for expanding markets, sharing resources, and fostering innovation. However, these collaborations introduce complex ethical challenges, including alignment of values, cultural differences, and shared responsibility for outcomes. Embedding ethics into strategic partnerships ensures trust, long-term viability, and mutual benefit while protecting organizational reputation and stakeholder interests. 24.2 Importance of Ethics in Partnerships. Trust building. Ethical alignment strengthens confidence among partners, customers, and stakeholders. Risk mitigation. Reduces legal, financial, and reputational risks associated with unethical practices. Sustainable collaboration. Ethical governance ensures long-term success and fair value sharing. Cultural alignment. Supports understanding and respect for diverse organizational and national norms. Stakeholder assurance. Demonstrates corporate responsibility to regulators, investors, and communities. Example: global pharmaceutical alliances adhere to strict ethical and compliance standards to ensure patient safety, regulatory compliance, and social responsibility. 24.3 Ethical Challenges in Global Alliances. Cultural differences, divergent social norms, and ethical expectations may create conflicts. Legal and regulatory variation. Partners may operate under different laws and enforcement standards. Accountability. Shared responsibilities can obscure ethical ownership in decision-making. Resource allocation. Ethical dilemmas may arise in cost-sharing, labor practices, or environmental responsibilities. Intellectual property. Ethical use of shared knowledge, patents, and trade secrets is critical. 24.4 Principles for Ethical Partnerships. Transparency, open communication regarding goals, risks, and performance. Integrity, align actions with shared values and corporate principles. Equity, ensure fair treatment, benefit sharing, and decision-making influence among partners. Accountability, define clear roles, responsibilities, and mechanisms for addressing breaches. Cultural sensitivity, respect local norms while upholding universal ethical standards. 24.5 Strategies to embed ethics in alliances. Partner due diligence. Evaluate potential partners' ethical culture, compliance history, and values alignment. Assess legal, social, and environmental risks in joint operations. Include ethical criteria in partner selection and contractual agreements. Codes of conduct and agreements. Develop shared codes of ethics for the partnership or alliance. Include explicit clauses on anti-corruption, labor standards, environmental responsibility, and governance. Joint governance and oversight. Establish joint ethics committees to monitor compliance and decision-making. Implement reporting systems for ethical concerns and incidents. Conduct periodic reviews and audits to ensure alignment and accountability. Continuous communication and training. Train employees and leadership on ethical expectations, values, and compliance standards. Promote ongoing dialogue between partners to resolve conflicts and reinforce shared values. 24.6 Case Study, Star Alliance, Ethical Collaboration in Global Aviation. Background: Star Alliance is a global airline network integrating multiple carriers across continents. Ethical alignment is crucial for operational efficiency, safety, and customer satisfaction. Actions: developed a shared code of conduct covering safety, environmental responsibility, and passenger rights. Conducted joint training programs for staff across partner airlines. Established governance structures to monitor compliance, resolve disputes, and ensure transparency. Aligned operations with local regulations and international aviation standards. Outcomes: enhanced trust and collaboration among member airlines. Strengthened global brand reputation and customer confidence. Demonstrated that ethical alignment is essential for sustainable global partnerships. Lessons learned: shared ethical principles facilitate coordination, risk management, and decision-making. Joint governance structures are critical for accountability and cultural integration. Continuous communication and training reinforce ethical norms across diverse organizations. 24.7 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Partnerships. Partner Ethics Assessment. Evaluate alignment with organizational values, compliance history, and cultural fit. Joint ethical governance frameworks, committees, reporting systems, and review mechanisms for shared accountability. Due diligence checklists. Assess legal, financial, environmental, and social risks. Training and awareness programs. Standardized ethics and compliance modules for partner employees. Monitoring and reporting dashboards. Track compliance, incidents, and performance across partners. 24.8 Challenges and Solutions. 24.9 Summary. Ethics is critical for sustainable strategic partnerships and global alliances. Principles such as transparency, integrity, equity, accountability, and cultural sensitivity guide collaborations. Strategies include partner due diligence, shared codes of conduct, joint governance, training, and communication. Case studies like Star Alliance demonstrate that ethical alignment strengthens collaboration, trust, and competitive advantage. Tools such as ethics assessments, governance frameworks, and monitoring dashboards support ethical oversight in complex partnerships. Chapter 25: Ethics in Corporate Social Responsibility, CSR, and Sustainability. 25.1 Introduction. Corporate social responsibility, CSR, and sustainability are intrinsically linked to ethical strategy. Modern organizations are expected not only to maximize profits, but also to operate responsibly toward society, the environment, and all stakeholders. Ethical CSR initiatives integrate moral principles into business operations, ensuring long-term societal and environmental value while supporting strategic goals. This chapter explores how ethics guide CSR, sustainability, and the strategic integration of social responsibility into business. 25.2 The ethical foundation of CSR. Moral responsibility. Organizations have an obligation to act for the welfare of society. Transparency. CSR initiatives must be genuine, measurable, and openly reported. Accountability. Companies should be accountable to stakeholders for social, environmental, and economic impacts. Sustainability. Ethical CSR focuses on long-term societal and environmental well-being, not just short-term PR benefits. Stakeholder engagement. Ethical CSR requires active dialogue with communities, employees, regulators, and investors. Example: Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan integrates ethical considerations in environmental stewardship, fair labor practices, and community engagement. 25.3 Ethical principles in CSR and sustainability. Environmental responsibility. Reduce carbon footprint, conserve resources, and prevent pollution. Social equity. Promote labor rights, diversity, inclusion, and fair treatment. Economic fairness. Ensure responsible business practices, fair trade, and equitable value creation. Transparency and reporting. Disclose CSR performance and sustainability outcomes honestly. Stakeholder participation. Include stakeholders in decision-making and project evaluation. 25.4 Integrating ethics into CSR strategy. Strategic alignment. Align CSR initiatives with core values, ethical principles, and business objectives. Ensure CSR supports long-term competitive advantage and societal impact. Program design and implementation. Conduct ethical risk assessments before launching CSR projects. Include measurable goals for environmental, social, and governance (ESG) impact. Incorporate stakeholder feedback throughout the program lifecycle. Monitoring and evaluation. Track KPIs related to environmental impact, social benefit, and governance performance. Conduct periodic audits to ensure initiatives are executed ethically. Adjust programs based on feedback, results, and changing societal expectations. 25.5 Case study. Patagonia. Ethics in Sustainability in CSR. Background. Patagonia is renowned for its ethical commitment to environmental sustainability and corporate social responsibility. Actions. Uses environmentally friendly materials and sustainable production processes. Donates a portion of profits to environmental causes and engages in activism. Maintains transparent supply chains to ensure ethical labor practices. Involves stakeholders, including customers and employees, in sustainability initiatives. Outcomes. Strong brand reputation and loyal customer base. Demonstrated long-term commitment to societal and environmental responsibility. Achieved competitive advantage through ethical CSR practices. Lessons learned. Ethical CSR can reinforce brand value and stakeholder trust. Transparency, sustainability, and stakeholder engagement are critical to effective CSR. Alignment of ethics, business strategy, and societal benefit creates enduring impact. 25.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical CSR. ESG Reporting Frameworks, Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. CSR Impact Assessment, Evaluate environmental, social, and economic outcomes of initiatives. Stakeholder Engagement Platforms, collect feedback and co-create solutions with communities and partners. Sustainability dashboards track progress against goals, benchmarks, and regulatory standards. Ethical audit checklists ensure programs adhere to corporate values, legal requirements, and best practices. 25.7 Challenges in ethical CSR and sustainability. 25.8 Summary. Ethics is foundational to CSR and sustainability, guiding organizations toward responsible, transparent, and accountable practices. Principles include environmental stewardship, social equity, economic fairness, transparency, and stakeholder participation. Strategies for ethical CSR involve strategic alignment, careful program design, stakeholder engagement, and continuous monitoring. Case studies like Patagonia demonstrate how ethical CSR enhances brand reputation, stakeholder trust, and long-term strategic advantage. Tools such as ESG reporting frameworks, CSR impact assessments, and sustainability dashboards support ethical execution and measurement. Chapter 26. Ethics in Risk Management and Strategic Decision-Making. 26.1 Introduction. Risk management is central to strategic management, encompassing financial, operational, reputational, regulatory, and ethical risks. Integrating ethics into risk management ensures that organizations make decisions that are not only legally compliant, but also morally responsible and socially sustainable. Ethical risk management strengthens stakeholder trust, enhances long-term sustainability, and reduces potential harm to society, the environment, and the organization itself. 26.2 The importance of ethics in risk management. Stakeholder trust. Ethical risk management builds confidence among investors, customers, employees, and regulators. Long-term sustainability reduces reputational and operational risks that could threaten strategic objectives. Legal and regulatory compliance proactively addresses ethical obligations that may not yet be codified into law. Decision quality incorporates moral considerations into choices, ensuring alignment with organizational values. Resilience. Ethical approaches to risk foster adaptive, responsible, and robust strategies. Example: financial institutions increasingly integrate ethics into risk models to address systemic and reputational risks post-global financial crises. 26.3 Types of risks with ethical dimensions. 26.4 Ethical Risk Assessment Framework. Risk identification. Identify potential ethical risks in operations, strategy, supply chains, technology, and partnerships. Include stakeholders' perspectives to uncover risks that may not be immediately obvious. Risk evaluation. Assess likelihood, potential impact, and ethical significance of identified risks. Prioritize risks that could cause significant harm to stakeholders or violate ethical principles. Risk mitigation. Implement preventive controls, monitoring, and ethical decision-making protocols. Develop contingency plans that align with ethical obligations and corporate values. Risk monitoring and review. Regularly evaluate risk exposure and effectiveness of mitigation strategies. Adjust policies, processes, and strategies based on evolving ethical expectations and operational realities. 26.5 Ethical decision-making in risk management. Stakeholder-centered analysis. Consider all affected parties in risk evaluation and response. Transparency. Communicate risk exposures, mitigation strategies, and decision rationale openly. Accountability. Clearly define responsibility for risk management decisions. Sustainability. Prioritize long-term ethical outcomes over short-term gains. Scenario planning. Use ethical foresight to anticipate unintended consequences and systemic risks. Tool example: ethical risk matrix to map potential scenarios and assess decisions against ethical principles. 26.6 Case study: BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill 2010. Background: the Deepwater Horizon disaster highlighted significant ethical lapses in operational and strategic risk management. Ethical failures. Cost-cutting decisions prioritize short-term profit over safety and environmental considerations. Inadequate transparency with regulators and stakeholders delayed appropriate responses. Risk assessment failed to consider worst-case scenarios and long-term environmental impact. Consequences. Massive environmental damage and human casualties. Billions in fines, compensation, and cleanup costs. Significant loss of stakeholder trust and brand reputation. Lessons learned. Ethical foresight must guide risk evaluation and mitigation. Transparency, accountability, and prioritizing human and environmental welfare are critical in risk management. Strategic decisions should balance profitability with ethical responsibility to prevent crises. 26.7 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Risk Management. Ethical Risk Matrix maps risks against ethical impact, likelihood, and severity. Stakeholder Impact Assessment evaluates potential consequences of risks on all stakeholders. Scenario Planning anticipates ethical dilemmas and prepares responsible responses. Compliance and Ethics Audits ensures operational adherence to legal and ethical standards. Integrated Risk Dashboards track financial, operational, reputational, and ethical risks in real time. 26.8 Challenges in Ethical Risk Management. 26.9 Summary. Ethical risk management integrates moral considerations into strategic and operational decision-making. It enhances stakeholder trust, organizational resilience, and long-term strategic success. Ethical frameworks guide identification, evaluation, mitigation, and monitoring of risks across financial, operational, reputational, and strategic dimensions. Case studies like BP emphasize the consequences of neglecting ethics in risk management. Tools such as ethical risk matrices, scenario planning, stakeholder impact assessments, and dashboards support proactive and principled risk management. Chapter 27. Ethics in Corporate Governance and Board Oversight. 27.1 Introduction. Corporate governance defines the system of rules, practices, and processes by which a company is directed and controlled. Ethics plays a critical role in governance, as boards set the tone for organizational values, strategic integrity, and stakeholder trust. Effective board oversight ensures that corporate decisions align with ethical principles, legal requirements, and long-term strategic goals. Ethical governance strengthens reputation, reduces risk, and promotes sustainable performance. 27.2 The Role of Ethics in Corporate Governance. Accountability. Boards ensure management decisions are responsible and aligned with stakeholder interests. Transparency. Ethical governance requires clear reporting, disclosure, and communication. Integrity. Boards uphold organizational values and ensure consistency in strategy, operations, and compliance. Stakeholder protection. Boards safeguard the rights and interests of shareholders, employees, customers, and the wider community. Strategic guidance. Ethical oversight ensures that long-term strategy balances profitability with social and environmental responsibility. Example: companies like Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft emphasize board-level ethical oversight to guide corporate strategy and risk management. 27.3 Ethical responsibilities of the board. Setting the tone at the top. Establishing a culture of integrity and ethical behavior. Demonstrating commitment to corporate values through actions and policies. Oversight of management. Monitoring executive decision-making for ethical and strategic alignment. Evaluating potential conflicts of interest, compliance, and risk exposure. Ensuring compliance and accountability. Implementing internal controls, audits, and reporting mechanisms. Reviewing regulatory compliance and adherence to legal and ethical standards. Stakeholder engagement. Balancing shareholder expectations with broader stakeholder interests. Incorporating feedback from employees, customers, investors, and communities into governance decisions. 27.4 Principles for Ethical Board Oversight. Independence. Board members should exercise independent judgment free from undue influence. Diligence. Commit sufficient time and expertise to monitor strategy, risks, and ethical issues. Transparency. Ensure accurate disclosure of financial, operational, and ethical information. Integrity. Uphold honesty, fairness, and consistency in all governance activities. Responsiveness. Act promptly to ethical lapses, stakeholder concerns, and emerging risks. 27.5 Case Study. Enron, Governance Failures and Ethical Lessons. Background. Enron's collapse in 2001 was a landmark case of governance failure with severe ethical implications. Failures. Board oversight was inadequate, allowing risky and unethical financial practices. Conflicts of interest went unaddressed, with executive compensation misaligned with ethical responsibility. Transparency and disclosure were compromised, misleading investors and regulators. Consequences. Bankruptcy, financial losses for employees and shareholders. Criminal charges against executives, and long-term reputational damage to the industry. Strengthen regulatory reforms, including the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Lessons learned. Board oversight is essential for ethical and strategic integrity. Transparency, diligence, and accountability are non-negotiable in governance. Governance frameworks must include ethical guidance, not just financial compliance. 27.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Board Oversight. Board ethics committees monitor compliance, review policies, and advise on ethical risks. Audit and risk committees oversee internal controls, reporting, and risk management with an ethical lens. Code of Conduct for Directors provides clear guidance on expectations, conflicts, and accountability. Stakeholder reporting dashboards facilitate transparency and ethical disclosure to stakeholders. Board evaluation frameworks assess performance, independence, and ethical oversight effectiveness. 27.7 Challenges in ethical governance. 27.8 Summary. Ethical governance ensures boards uphold integrity, transparency, and accountability. Boards set the tone at the top, monitor management, and safeguard stakeholder interests. Principles of independence, diligence, integrity, transparency, and responsiveness guide ethical oversight. Case studies like Enron illustrate the consequences of failing to integrate ethics into governance. Tools such as ethics committees, audit and risk committees, codes of conduct, and stakeholder reporting dashboards enhance board effectiveness in ethical oversight. Chapter 28. Ethics in Corporate Culture Transformation. 28.1 Introduction. Corporate culture shapes how employees think, behave, and make decisions. Transforming culture to prioritize ethics is essential for ensuring that organizational values are consistently reflected in daily operations, strategic decisions, and stakeholder interactions. Ethical culture transformation is a strategic initiative that enhances trust, resilience, and long-term competitive advantage by embedding integrity, accountability, and transparency at every level. 28.2 The Role of Culture in Ethics. Behavioral influence. Culture determines how employees act in ethically challenging situations. Decision-making. Ethical culture guides decision-making aligned with values beyond compliance. Reinforcement. Recognition and reward systems reinforce ethical behavior. Consistency. Embeds ethical principles across functions, regions, and hierarchical levels. Resilience. A strong ethical culture helps organizations navigate crises, risks, and stakeholder scrutiny. Example: Microsoft's cultural transformation under Satya Nadella emphasizes empathy, collaboration, and ethical responsibility, reinforcing both innovation and trust. 28.3 Steps for Ethical Culture Transformation. Assess current culture. Conduct surveys, interviews, and audits to evaluate existing ethical norms. Identify gaps between stated values and actual behavior. Map areas of high ethical risk or recurring misconduct. Define desired ethical culture. Articulate core values, principles, and expected behaviors. Ensure alignment with corporate mission, vision, and strategic objectives. Identify cultural attributes to encourage, e.g., transparency, accountability, fairness. Leadership alignment. Engage senior leaders to model ethical behavior consistently. Train leaders in ethical decision-making and cultural reinforcement. Tie leadership performance evaluations to ethical and cultural outcomes. Communication and engagement. Communicate values and behavioral expectations through multiple channels. Use storytelling, campaigns, and workshops to reinforce ethical norms. Encourage dialogue, feedback, and participation from employees at all levels. Embed ethics into systems and processes. Integrate ethics into policies, performance management training, and reward systems. Establish reporting channels for ethical concerns and misconduct. Monitor and measure cultural progress using KPIs and regular assessments. 28.4 Case Study: Microsoft Culture Transformation Through Ethics. Background: Microsoft underwent a major cultural transformation to shift from a competitive, siloed environment to one focused on collaboration, inclusion, and ethical decision-making. Actions: redefined corporate mission and values to emphasize integrity and empathy. Developed leadership programs to reinforce ethical behavior and collaboration. Implemented internal surveys and feedback mechanisms to assess cultural change. Integrated ethical principles into performance evaluations and recognition programs. Outcomes: enhanced employee engagement and satisfaction. Strengthened ethical decision-making across departments and regions. Improved innovation, collaboration, and external stakeholder trust. Lessons learned: culture change requires leadership commitment, clear values, and systemic reinforcement. Embedding ethics into processes, rewards, and communication sustains transformation. Measuring cultural alignment helps track progress and maintain accountability. 28.5 Tools and Frameworks for Culture Transformation. Cultural assessment surveys. Evaluate employee perceptions of ethics, values, and behavior. Ethical behavior KPIs. Track misconduct reports, policy adherence, and ethical performance. Leadership development programs. Train leaders to model and reinforce desired culture. Ethics communication platforms. Share success stories, policies, and guidance across the organization. Recognition and reward systems. Encourage ethical behavior and cultural alignment. 28.6 Challenges in Transforming Ethical Culture. 28.7 Summary. Ethical culture transformation embeds values of integrity, accountability, and transparency throughout the organization. Steps include assessing current culture, defining desired culture, aligning leadership, engaging employees, and embedding ethics into systems and processes. Case studies like Microsoft demonstrate that culture transformation strengthens ethical behavior, stakeholder trust, and strategic performance. Tools such as cultural assessments, KPIs, leadership programs, communication platforms, and reward systems support sustained ethical culture. Chapter 29. Ethical Leadership in the Digital Age. 29.1 Introduction. The digital age presents unprecedented opportunities and challenges for organizations. Artificial intelligence, AI, big data, blockchain, social media, and digital platforms transform business operations, decision-making, and stakeholder engagement. However, these innovations also raise complex ethical questions around privacy, bias, transparency, accountability, and societal impact. Ethical leadership in the digital era ensures that technology is leveraged responsibly, supporting strategic goals while upholding organizational values and societal norms. 29.2 The importance of ethical leadership in technology. Trust and credibility. Ethical leadership builds trust among customers, employees, regulators, and the public. Risk mitigation. Addresses potential misuse of technology, cybersecurity breaches, and reputational threats. Innovation with responsibility. Guides the development and deployment of technologies in socially beneficial ways. Regulatory compliance. Ensures adherence to data privacy laws, AI regulations, and industry standards. Long-term strategic value. Ethical digital leadership supports sustainable growth, brand reputation, and stakeholder loyalty. Example: Satya Nadella at Microsoft emphasizes ethical AI and responsible technology use as central to corporate strategy. 29.3 Ethical challenges in the digital age. 29.4 Principles for ethical digital leadership. Transparency. Communicate clearly about data collection, AI decision-making, and digital operations. Accountability. Leaders must take responsibility for the ethical implications of technology. Fairness. Ensure digital systems and decisions treat all stakeholders equitably. Privacy protection. Uphold confidentiality and ethical handling of personal and organizational data. Sustainability. Use technology to create long-term social, environmental, and organizational value. 29.5 Strategies for ethical leadership in digital transformation. Ethical technology governance. Establish ethics committees or boards for AI, cybersecurity, and digital initiatives. Create policies for responsible technology deployment and use. Monitor ethical compliance and emerging risks in digital operations. Stakeholder engagement. Engage customers, employees, regulators, and communities in digital strategy decisions. Solicit feedback on ethical concerns, biases, and societal impact. Leadership training and awareness. Train leaders and employees on ethical decision-making in AI, data management, and digital innovation. Integrate ethical principles into technology leadership development programs. Transparency and reporting. Disclose ethical practices, digital risks, and AI governance frameworks. Regularly report on technology's social and ethical impact. 29.6 Case Study. Google, AI Ethics and Responsible Leadership. Background: Google, as a leading AI and technology company, has faced ethical challenges in AI deployment, data privacy, and algorithmic bias. Actions: published AI principles emphasizing fairness, accountability, and transparency. Created internal AI ethics boards and review processes. Engaged external experts, academic institutions, and stakeholders to evaluate AI impacts. Implemented internal training and reporting frameworks for ethical AI use. Outcomes: strengthened internal and external trust in AI initiatives. Promoted responsible technology development and deployment. Reinforced the importance of leadership accountability in ethical technology use. Lessons learned: ethical leadership is critical to managing digital risks and societal impact. Governance, transparency, and stakeholder engagement are essential tools for responsible digital innovation. Organizations must continuously adapt ethical frameworks to evolving technologies and societal expectations. 29.7 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Digital Leadership. AI Ethics Guidelines. Establish standards for fairness, accountability, transparency, and safety. Digital Risk Assessment Matrix. Evaluate potential ethical, operational, and reputational risks. Stakeholder feedback platforms. Collect input on digital and AI initiatives. Training modules. Ethical decision-making in AI, cybersecurity, and data management. Governance dashboards. Track compliance, ethical performance, and digital risk mitigation. 29.8 Challenges in ethical digital leadership. 29.9 Summary. Ethical leadership in the digital age is essential to managing technology responsibly and strategically. Leaders must navigate challenges such as data privacy, AI bias, cybersecurity, and workplace automation. Principles of transparency, accountability, fairness, privacy, and sustainability guide responsible digital leadership. Case studies like Google demonstrate the importance of governance, stakeholder engagement, and continuous ethical oversight. Tools including AI ethics guidelines, risk assessment matrices, training, and governance dashboards support principled decision-making in technology-driven organizations. Chapter 30. Integrating ethics into strategic performance metrics. 30.1 Introduction. Strategic performance metrics traditionally focus on financial and operational outcomes. However, to create truly sustainable organizations, metrics must also reflect ethical behavior, social responsibility, and adherence to organizational values. Integrating ethics into performance measurement ensures that success is evaluated not only by profit, but also by integrity, stakeholder trust, and long-term value creation. This chapter explores frameworks, tools, and strategies to embed ethics into performance metrics at organizational and individual levels. 30.2 Importance of ethical performance metrics. Reinforces organizational values. Metrics aligned with ethics signal that integrity is a priority. Improves decision-making. Guides managers and employees to consider ethical implications alongside financial outcomes. Enhances stakeholder trust. Demonstrates accountability to employees, customers, regulators, and investors. Reduces risk. Monitors ethical compliance and mitigates reputational, legal, and operational risks. Supports long-term strategy. Aligns day-to-day performance with sustainable and socially responsible objectives. Example: companies like Unilever and Patagonia include ESG, environmental social governance, KPIs, alongside traditional financial metrics. 30.3 Principles for ethical performance measurement. Alignment. Metrics should reflect organizational values and ethical standards. Transparency. Performance measurement processes must be clear and understandable. Accountability. Individuals and teams must be responsible for meeting ethical as well as operational goals. Comprehensiveness. Include a balance of financial, operational, social, and ethical indicators. Actionable. Metrics should guide decisions and promote continuous improvement. 30.4 Frameworks for integrating ethics into metrics. Balanced scorecard with ethical KPIs. Extend traditional balanced scorecards to include ethical, social, and environmental metrics. Example KPIs: employee engagement on ethics training, compliance adherence, customer trust scores, environmental footprint. ESG performance metrics. Measure environmental impact, social responsibility, and governance adherence. Examples: carbon emissions reduction, diversity and inclusion indices, ethical sourcing compliance. Ethical behavior indicators. Track incidents of misconduct, whistleblower reports, and adherence to codes of conduct. Measure corrective actions and improvements over time. Stakeholder feedback metrics. Include surveys, satisfaction scores, and engagement indicators from employees, customers, and partners. Monitor perceived fairness, transparency, and ethical conduct in business operations. 30.5 Case Study. Unilever. Ethical metrics in strategic performance. Background. Unilever integrates sustainability and ethics into its core strategy through the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. Actions. Developed KPIs covering environmental impact, social initiatives, and ethical sourcing. Integrated ethical performance into executive evaluations and incentives. Monitored progress via dashboards, internal audits, and external reporting. Engaged stakeholders to validate metrics and impact measurement. Outcomes. Strengthened alignment between corporate strategy and ethical commitments. Enhanced stakeholder trust and brand reputation. Demonstrated measurable long-term value creation beyond financial performance. Lessons learned. Ethical performance metrics reinforce desired behaviors and values. Integrating ethics into strategic KPIs aligns operational goals with societal expectations. Continuous monitoring and feedback ensure sustainability and accountability. 30.6 Tools and Frameworks for Ethical Performance Measurement. Ethics dashboards track key ethical indicators alongside financial and operational metrics. Balanced scorecards with ESG KPIs integrate ethics, sustainability, and governance into performance evaluations. Whistleblower and incident tracking systems monitor ethical breaches and corrective actions. Stakeholder surveys and feedback platforms evaluate perceptions of ethical behavior. Benchmarking and audits compare ethical performance with industry standards and best practices. 30.7 Challenges in measuring ethical performance. 30.8 Summary. Integrating ethics into performance metrics ensures alignment of organizational values with strategic objectives. Principles of alignment, transparency, accountability, comprehensiveness, and actionability guide effective ethical measurement. Frameworks include balanced scorecards with ethical KPIs, ESG metrics, ethical behavior indicators, and stakeholder feedback metrics. Case studies like Unilever demonstrate the value of embedding ethics into strategic performance for trust, long-term sustainability, and competitive advantage. Tools such as dashboards, audits, surveys, and benchmarking support monitoring, reporting, and continuous improvement. Chapter 31. The Future of Strategic Management and Ethics. 31.1 Introduction. The landscape of strategic management is evolving rapidly, influenced by technology, globalization, social expectations, and environmental challenges. Ethics is no longer an optional component. It is central to sustainable competitive advantage, stakeholder trust, and long-term organizational resilience. This chapter explores how emerging trends, digital transformation, and societal expectations are shaping the future of ethical strategic management. 31.2 Emerging Trends Impacting Ethical Strategic Management. Digital transformation. AI, big data, IoT, and blockchain are reshaping decision-making, supply chains, and stakeholder engagement. Ethical challenges include bias, privacy, transparency, and accountability. Globalization. Multinational operations increase the complexity of ethical compliance due to cultural, legal, and societal differences. Sustainability and ESG focus. Stakeholders increasingly demand environmental responsibility, social equity, and governance transparency. Stakeholder capitalism. Companies are expected to create value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders, aligning strategy with societal well-being. Regulatory evolution. Governments and global organizations are imposing stricter standards for ethical conduct, sustainability, and corporate accountability. 31.3 The Role of Ethics in Future Strategic Management. Trust and reputation management. Ethics will be a primary driver of brand loyalty and stakeholder confidence. Risk management. Proactively addressing ethical, social, and technological risks will reduce crises and operational disruptions. Innovation with responsibility. Ethical frameworks will guide AI, biotechnology, and digital innovation to ensure societal benefit. Long-term value creation. Ethical strategy fosters sustainability, employee engagement, and social legitimacy. Decision-making agility. Ethical foresight enables organizations to anticipate and respond to societal, technological, and regulatory shifts. 31.4 Integrating emerging technologies with ethical strategy. Artificial intelligence and automation. Ensure transparency, fairness, and accountability in AI deployment. Implement ethical review boards and continuous monitoring for unintended consequences. Example: Ethical AI principles guiding facial recognition, predictive analytics, and autonomous systems. Blockchain and data ethics. Secure data privacy, prevent misuse, and maintain transparency in transactions. Implement governance frameworks for decentralized systems to uphold trust. Sustainability technologies. Use renewable energy, green supply chains, and circular economy practices. Align technological innovation with environmental and social impact metrics. 31.5 Case Study: Patagonia and Sustainable Strategic Management. Background: Patagonia demonstrates how integrating ethics, sustainability, and innovation shapes strategic management for long-term advantage. Actions: adopted environmentally responsible practices across production and supply chains. Invested in sustainable innovation, such as recycled materials and renewable energy. Engaged stakeholders, including customers and communities, to co-create sustainability initiatives. Integrated ethics into performance metrics, corporate governance, and leadership decisions. Outcomes: strong brand reputation and customer loyalty. Reduced environmental impact while maintaining profitability. Demonstrated how ethical strategy and sustainability can drive competitive advantage. Lessons learned: ethics and sustainability are core strategic differentiators. Stakeholder engagement and transparency are essential for long-term success. Ethical foresight ensures resilience and adaptability in a rapidly evolving market. 31.6 Tools and Frameworks for the Future of Ethical Strategy. Ethical foresight models predict potential ethical risks in emerging technologies and markets. Sustainability and ESG dashboards track environmental, social, and governance performance in real time. Stakeholder engagement platforms collaborate with communities, customers, and regulators for ethical insights. Scenario planning and simulation explore ethical implications of strategic options under multiple futures. Integrated governance and ethics frameworks combine board oversight, corporate culture, and technology governance to ensure alignment. 31.7 Challenges for the Future. 31.8 Summary. The future of strategic management will increasingly integrate ethics, technology, sustainability, and stakeholder engagement. Emerging trends such as digital transformation, globalization, and ESG focus require proactive ethical foresight. Organizations must embed ethics into innovation, governance, risk management, and performance measurement to maintain competitive advantage. Case studies like Patagonia illustrate that ethical strategy and sustainability drive resilience, trust, and long-term value. Tools such as ethical foresight models, ESG dashboards, stakeholder engagement platforms, and integrated governance frameworks will be essential for future-ready organizations. Chapter 32: Conclusion and Synthesis. 32.1 Introduction. Strategic management and ethics are inseparable in modern organizational practice. Over the course of this book, we have explored how ethical principles underpin strategy formulation, execution, and evaluation across diverse domains, including governance, innovation, risk management, CSR, and digital transformation. This concluding chapter synthesizes the key insights, frameworks, and lessons, providing a roadmap for integrating ethics into strategic decision-making for sustainable competitive advantage. 32.2 Key Takeaways from the book. Ethics as a strategic imperative. Ethics is not optional. It guides long-term value creation, trust, and stakeholder engagement. Organizations that embed ethics into strategy outperform peers in resilience, reputation, and sustainability. Integration across organizational functions. Ethical principles must permeate all aspects of the organization: governance, culture, partnerships, innovation, risk management, and performance evaluation. Leadership and culture as drivers. Ethical leadership sets the tone at the top, shaping corporate culture and reinforcing ethical behavior at all levels. Transforming culture requires commitment, communication, training, and systemic reinforcement. Tools and frameworks enable execution. Balanced scorecards, ESG metrics, ethical dashboards, risk matrices, and governance frameworks operationalize ethics. Stakeholder engagement, scenario planning, and monitoring systems ensure accountability and continuous improvement. Case studies demonstrate real-world application. Examples from companies like Microsoft, Unilever, Patagonia, Google, and Star Alliance illustrate the strategic benefits of ethical integration. Lessons from failures, such as Enron and BP, underscore the consequences of neglecting ethics. 32.3 The Strategic Ethics Framework. Core components. Values and principles define integrity, transparency, accountability, fairness, and sustainability. Leadership and governance. Boards, executives, and managers model ethical behavior and oversee compliance. Culture and engagement. Ethical norms are embedded in organizational culture and employee behavior. Risk and innovation management. Ethical foresight guides risk assessment, mitigation, and responsible innovation. Measurement and accountability. KPIs, ESG metrics, dashboards, and reporting ensure transparency and alignment with values. Stakeholder integration. Continuous engagement ensures that strategy reflects societal, environmental, and customer expectations. Visualization. A circular model where values drive leadership, culture, risk management, measurement, and stakeholder integration, creating a feedback loop for continuous ethical improvement. 32.4 Future directions in strategic management and ethics. Digital and AI-driven strategy. Ethical frameworks will guide AI deployment, automation, and data management. Globalization and multicultural ethics. Organizations must harmonize universal ethical standards with local norms. Sustainability as a core strategic pillar. ESG considerations will become inseparable from corporate strategy. Stakeholder-centric strategy. Organizations will increasingly prioritize long-term societal value over short-term profits. Continuous ethical innovation. Ethics will not only prevent harm, but also drive competitive differentiation and trust in a rapidly evolving market. 32.5 Final reflections. Ethics is both a compass and a foundation for strategic management, ensuring organizations act responsibly, innovate sustainably, and maintain trust. Strategic decisions that integrate ethical considerations consistently produce superior outcomes for organizations and society. Leadership, culture, governance, measurement, and stakeholder engagement are interdependent components of an effective ethical strategy. The evolving business landscape demands that organizations adopt a proactive, anticipatory, and principled approach to strategy. Quote, "Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do." Potter Stewart. 32.6 Actionable steps for practitioners. Assess organizational ethics, conduct audits, surveys, and risk evaluations. Define and communicate values. Ensure clarity in principles and expected behavior. Integrate ethics into strategy. Embed ethical KPIs into balanced scorecards and strategic plans. Build ethical leadership. Train leaders to model integrity, transparency, and accountability. Engage stakeholders continuously. Include employees, customers, regulators, and communities in ethical strategy. Monitor and improve. Use dashboards, audits, and scenario planning to track progress and adapt. 32.7 Summary. Ethical strategic management is essential for sustainable competitive advantage, resilience, and stakeholder trust. Integrating ethics across leadership, culture, governance, risk management, innovation, and performance measurement ensures alignment with long-term objectives. The book provides frameworks, case studies, and tools that guide organizations in embedding ethics into every aspect of strategy. Future-ready organizations will leverage ethical foresight, stakeholder engagement, and sustainability to thrive in a rapidly changing world.